You want to know what real power looks like? It isn't gold or titles or bloodlines stretching back to the conquest. Real power is standing in a room full of vultures who want you dead and making them afraid to breathe too loud. That's Adrian Blackthorne at 36, Duke, Fortress, walking scar tissue. And this is the story of how a 19-year-old girl with nothing but spite became the only person who could crack him open. Stay with me. You'll need to see how far people fall before they learn to stand. And I promise you, by the end of this, you'll understand why some loves are worth bleeding for. You say? The carriage wheels had been grinding against gravel for 3 hours when Evelyn Marlowe finally accepted she was going to her own funeral. Not a literal one. That would have been kinder. This was the slow death, the kind that ate you alive while everyone smiled and called it salvation. Outside the window, the English countryside rolled past in shades of gray and dying green, estates and tenant farms bleeding into one another like bruises spreading under skin. April rain hammered the roof. Inside, her mother dabbed at tears that hadn't stopped flowing since they left London. Catherine Marlowe had been beautiful once. Evelyn could see it in the bone structure, the ghost of something fine before the creditors, and the shame had hollowed her out. Now her mother looked like wet paper, crumpling a little more with each mile. "You're doing the right thing," Catherine whispered for maybe the 100th time. "You're saving us all." Evelyn said nothing. She'd learned that silence was safer than honesty, and honesty was this. She would rather drown herself in the Thames than marry Adrian Blackthorne, but drowning was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not when her father had gambled away their lands, their future, everything but the Marlowe name. And even that was worth less than horseshit at market. The Duke had made his offer 6 weeks ago. Marry the girl, absorb her family's debts, restore their standing. In exchange, he got a broodmare young enough to give him heirs and decorative enough to trot out at society functions. Everyone said Evelyn was lucky. Everyone was a liar. "He's not cruel," her mother tried again, voice shaking with the desperation of someone who needed the lie to be true. "I've heard he's proper, disciplined. He'll provide for you." Evelyn looked at her mother then, really looked, and saw a woman who'd spent 20 years married to a charming drunk who destroyed them all with a smile. Proper and disciplined. Yes, that's what you got when you traded one nightmare for another. The carriage lurched around a corner, and suddenly the estate appeared through the rain, like something conjured from a Gothic fever dream. Blackthorne Manor wasn't a home. It was a declaration of war against joy itself. Dark stone, darker windows, architecture that seemed designed specifically to crush hope. Towers jutted up like broken teeth. Ivy strangled the eastern wall. The whole structure crouched in a valley surrounded by woods so thick they looked black even in daylight. Evelyn's stomach turned to ice. The carriage stopped. Servants appeared with umbrellas, faceless and efficient. Her mother clutched her hand, squeezed once, then let go. That was it. 20 years of motherhood, and all Catherine Marlowe could offer was a hand squeeze and wet eyes. "Out," someone said. Not unkindly, but firm. Evelyn stepped into the rain and the rest of her life. The entrance hall could have swallowed her entire London townhouse twice over. Black and white marble in checkerboard patterns. A staircase wide enough to march an army up. Portraits lining the walls. Generations of Blackthorns staring down with the same expression her future husband probably wore when crushing peasants. The air smelled like old money and older wood and something else. Something like a crypt. A woman appeared, tall and severe, dressed in black that matched the house. Housekeeper, Evelyn guessed. The kind who ran estates the way generals ran campaigns. Miss Marlowe. The woman's voice was clipped, accent upper class, but not quite aristocratic. "Mrs. Garrick, head of household. His Grace is occupied with estate matters. You'll be shown to your chambers. Dinner is at 8. Punctuality is expected, not requested. Expected." Evelyn opened her mouth to say something cutting, but her mother's fingernails dug into her arm. So she nodded, playing the obedient child one last time, and let herself be led upstairs like livestock to a pen. Her chambers turned out to be a suite larger than any space she'd ever called her own. Bedroom, sitting room, dressing room, all decorated in deep blues and silver that probably cost more than her father's final debts. A fire burned in the hearth. Her trunks were already being unpacked by maids who wouldn't meet her eyes. It was a beautiful cage, and she hated it immediately. The maids finished and vanished. Catherine hovered near the door, hands twisting together. Evelyn stood at the window looking out at gardens slowly drowning in rain and waited for her mother to leave. Evelyn, don't. Evelyn didn't turn around. Just don't. He could have chosen anyone. You should be grateful. Grateful. The word tasted like poison. Right. Grateful that a man nearly twice my age bought me like a horse at auction. Grateful that I get to spread my legs for a stranger because father couldn't stop throwing dice. Should I curtsy too, mother? Maybe write him a thank you note? Catherine gasped. Evelyn, that's vulgar. It's honest. Evelyn turned then, and she must have looked feral because her mother actually stepped back. You want me to pretend this is something it's not? Fine. You go ahead and pretend, but don't ask me to thank him for purchasing what's left of my life. Her mother's face crumpled. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't spend. Evelyn's voice came out flat, dead. You should go. I need to dress for dinner. Catherine fled. The door closed. Evelyn stood alone in her beautiful prison and felt something inside her chest go very, very cold. Not sad, not scared, cold. The kind of cold that meant something had frozen over that probably shouldn't have. The kind of cold that would let her survive this. She was 19 years old, and she'd just learned that survival and living were two different things. Dinner was an exercise in psychological warfare, disguised as a meal. The dining room could have seated 40, but held only 3. Evelyn, her mother, and an empty chair at the head of the table that might as well have been a throne. Mrs. Garrick supervised from the shadows while servants brought course after course of food that Evelyn couldn't taste. Roasted meat, some kind of fish, vegetables she didn't recognize. Everything probably cost more than her family spent in a month, and it all turned to sawdust in her mouth. He's been delayed, Mrs. Garrick announced at 8:30, as though this explained everything. His Grace extends his apologies. Catherine nodded, grateful for scraps of courtesy. Evelyn said nothing, but inside she was adding this to the list. Couldn't even be bothered to meet his future wife on her first night. Probably had more important things to do, like counting money, or oppressing tenants, or whatever the hell dukes did when they weren't buying children. They ate in silence. The clock ticked. Rain battered the windows. Evelyn imagined 20 or 30 more years of meals exactly like this one and wanted to scream. At 9, Mrs. Garrick dismissed them. Catherine kissed Evelyn's cheek, a butterfly touch, already morning, and disappeared toward the guest chambers. Evelyn headed upstairs to her suite, trailed by a young maid who'd been assigned to her. What's your name? Evelyn asked, just to hear something other than her own thoughts. The girl looked startled. Lucy, miss. How long have you worked here, Lucy? 3 years, miss. And His Grace? Evelyn kept her voice light, conversational. What's he like? Lucy's expression shuddered immediately. Very good to his staff, miss? Very fair. Which meant either the girl was terrified of being overheard or had been trained not to gossip, probably both. Evelyn tried a different angle. Does he dine alone often? I couldn't say, miss. Translation, constantly. They reached her chambers. Lucy helped her undress, hung her gown, laid out a nightdress that was probably worth more than Lucy's annual wages. The whole time, Evelyn watched the girl's face, looking for cracks, for information, for anything human in this mausoleum. Lucy, she said softly, can I ask you something? The maid paused, wary. Yes, miss. Do you think I'll be happy here? It was a cruel question, unfair to ask. But Evelyn needed to know if anyone in this house was capable of honesty, even a servant. Lucy's face did something complicated. Then she smiled, and it was the saddest thing Evelyn had seen all day. I think you'll be provided for, miss. Very well provided for. That's not what I asked. I know, miss. Lucy looked down. Will that be all? Evelyn let her go. She sat at the window in her expensive nightdress and stared out at the rain-soaked grounds and admitted to herself that she was trapped. Not just by debt or duty or family obligation, trapped by the simple mathematics of being a woman with no money and no choices in a world built by men who had both. Somewhere in this sprawling tomb of a house, Adrian Blackthorne was doing whatever dukes did in the dark. Somewhere her mother was probably crying into her pillow. Somewhere her father was likely drunk in London, already spending the blood money his daughter's virginity had earned him. And here sat Evelyn, 19 and furious and so goddamn scared she could barely breathe. She made a decision then. If she was going to be sold, she'd make him pay for the purchase every single day. If this was going to be a prison, she'd burn it down from the inside. And if Adrian Blackthorne thought he'd bought himself an obedient little wife, he was about to learn exactly how wrong a duke could be. She met him for the first time at breakfast. Evelyn had barely slept, her mind churning with half-formed plans of rebellion. She'd risen early, dressed herself before Lucy could arrive, and made her way downstairs determined to at least claim the small dignity of choosing her own clothing. The morning room was smaller than the dining hall, but still large enough to echo. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, revealing a table set for two. He was already there. Adrian Blackthorne sat at the head of the table reading correspondence, a cup of coffee cooling at his elbow. He didn't look up when she entered. Evelyn paused in the doorway, taking inventory. Tall, even sitting down. Dark hair with gray threading through it at the temples, broad shoulders and a perfectly tailored coat. Strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, the kind of face that would photograph well in marble. Handsome, she supposed, if you liked your men carved from stone. He looked older than 36, or maybe it was just that he carried age like armor. She stood there for a full 30 seconds before he acknowledged her existence. "You're awake early." His voice was deep, controlled, utterly without warmth. He still didn't look up from his papers. "Sit." Not good morning, not welcome. "Sit." Like she was a dog. Evelyn felt rage flash through her chest, hot and clarifying. She sat, but slowly, making it clear she did so by choice, not command. A servant appeared with tea and toast. Evelyn ignored both. Adrian set down his correspondence and finally looked at her. The impact was immediate. His eyes were gray, the color of winter storms, and they moved over her face with the clinical precision of someone conducting an inspection. Not attraction, not even curiosity. Assessment. She was a horse he'd purchased sight unseen, and now he was checking for defects. Evelyn stared back, refusing to blink, refusing to be the first to look away. Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth, but perhaps acknowledgement. "You'll find the routine here is structured," he said. "Breakfast at 7, dinner at 8. Mrs. Garrick will acquaint you with household expectations. You have access to the library, the gardens, and the east drawing room. The west wing is my personal study and is not to be disturbed." Evelyn tilted her head. "Am I a guest or a prisoner?" "You're my betrothed." His tone didn't change. "The distinction is irrelevant. Actually, I think it's extremely relevant." His jaw tightened, the first crack in the facade. "Think what you like. The marriage will take place in 6 weeks. Until then, you'll conduct yourself appropriately." Appropriately. Evelyn smiled, and it wasn't kind. And what does that mean, exactly? Smile when spoken to? Spread my legs on command? Should I practice curtsying, or will a simple bow suffice? She expected him to react. Anger, disgust, something. Instead, Adrian picked up his coffee, took a sip, and studied her with those winter gray eyes. "You're angry," he said finally. "I expected that." "How perceptive." "You're also frightened, though you hide it better than your mother did." He set down the cup. "Let me be clear, Miss Marlowe. I did not choose this arrangement for companionship or affection. I chose it because your bloodline is acceptable and your situation was desperate enough to ensure cooperation. In return, your family's debts are cleared. Your name is restored, and you will live in comfort most women of your station could never imagine." So romantic. Romance is a luxury neither of us can afford. He stood, and she realized he was even taller than she'd thought, well over 6 feet. "You will be treated with respect. You will want for nothing. In time, you will provide heirs, and we will maintain a civilized household. That is the arrangement. If you find it intolerable, you're welcome to leave." He walked past her toward the door. Evelyn's hands were shaking with fury. "Where would I go?" she called after him. Adrian paused, hand on the doorframe. He didn't turn around. "I have no idea. But that's your problem, not mine." He left. Evelyn sat alone in the sunlit room, surrounded by fine china and fresh flowers and all the trappings of wealth, and understood with perfect clarity that she'd just met the most dangerous kind of man. Not cruel, not violent, just utterly, completely indifferent. Cruelty you could fight. Indifference was a wall you could beat yourself bloody against and never leave a mark.
Días.
She spent the next week testing boundaries. First boundary, the West Wing. Adrian had said not to disturb it. So naturally, on her third day, Evelyn found herself standing outside his study door at 2 in the afternoon. She knocked. No answer. She knocked harder. The door opened. Adrian stood there in shirt sleeves, papers in hand, looking at her with the expression of a man interrupted mid-surgery. Yes? I was looking for the library, Evelyn lied smoothly. It's on the second floor, East Wing, where Mrs. Garrick showed you on your first day. I must have forgotten. His eyes narrowed slightly. Then I suggest you improve your memory. He started to close the door. Evelyn stuck her foot in the gap. What are you working on? Estate business. That's vague. It's intentional. Remove your foot, make me. It was childish. She knew it was childish even as the words left her mouth. But something about his controlled precision, his absolute refusal to acknowledge her as anything but an inconvenience, made her want to shatter that calm. Adrian looked at her foot, then at her face. Then he did something she didn't expect. He smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Miss Marlowe, he said quietly, I have neither the time nor the inclination for games. You want to test me? Fine. Consider yourself tested. Now move, or I will move you. His voice remained perfectly level. That made it worse somehow. Evelyn removed her foot. Adrian closed the door in her face. Point to the Duke. Second boundary, dinner punctuality. Adrian had made it clear that 8 meant 8, not 5 past. So Evelyn started arriving at 1/4 past, then 20 past, then 1/2 past, sweeping in wearing her most expensive gown while he sat at the head of the table, food growing cold, expression carved from granite. He never said a word, just nodded to the servants to begin serving, as though her tardiness was merely another weather pattern beyond his control. On the 5th late arrival, Evelyn found her place setting had been removed entirely. Where's my seat? She asked Mrs. Garrick. The housekeeper's face was professionally blank. His Grace dines at 8, miss. You're welcome to request a tray in your chambers. Evelyn looked at Adrian. He was cutting into his roasted pheasant with surgical precision, utterly absorbed in the task. This is ridiculous, she said. He continued eating. I said this is ridiculous. I heard you. His voice was mild. I disagree. Dinner's at 8. You arrive at 8, you dine. You arrive at 1/2 past, you don't. The logic is sound. You can't just remove my seat. I can do whatever I please. It's my table. He finally looked up. You're confusing marriage with democracy, Miss Marlowe. Common mistake. Evelyn felt her face flush hot. I hope you choke on that pheasant. Noted. He went back to eating. She fled upstairs so furious she was shaking. A tray arrived 20 minutes later, delivered by Lucy, who wouldn't meet her eyes. The food was identical to what had been served downstairs, still warm, beautifully presented. Evelyn threw the entire tray against the wall. The china shattered, sauce dripped down the wallpaper. Lucy gasped and ran for help. Within minutes, servants appeared to clean the mess while Evelyn stood by the window, chest heaving, hands clenched into fists. No one said a word to her about it. The wall was cleaned, the broken china removed, and by morning you'd never know anything had happened. That was almost worse than punishment. Being ignored. Being managed like a tantrum from a child who'd eventually tire herself out. Third boundary. Social obligations. A week into her stay, invitations began arriving for both of them. Lady Pemberton's garden party. Lord Ashford's hunt breakfast. The Countess of Somewhere or Other's musicale. Adrian accepted them all, which meant Evelyn was expected to attend as his future wife, making polite conversation while society matrons assessed her like livestock. She refused the first invitation, claimed a headache. Adrian went alone. When he returned that evening, he stopped by her sitting room. Tomorrow evening is the Havisham Ball, he said. You'll attend. I won't. You will. You can't force me. He walked into her sitting room uninvited, moved to the window and stood looking out at the gardens. When he spoke, his voice was very quiet. Let me explain something, Miss Marlowe. Your family's restoration depends on this marriage appearing legitimate. That means public appearances. Together. If you refuse, people talk. People talking means your mother's social standing collapses. Your younger sisters... I don't have sisters. He turned. His eyes were cold. You don't now. But your mother has two nieces whose prospects depend entirely on the Marlowe name maintaining respectability. Refuse to attend, and I'll ensure every hostess in London knows the Blackthorn betrothal is a sham. Your extended family will be unmarriageable. Evelyn stared at him. That's blackmail. That's consequences. Be ready at 7 tomorrow. He left. Evelyn sat in the dark and hated him so completely it felt like drowning. She attended the Haversham ball. It was her first real glimpse of Adrian Blackthorn in his natural habitat, and what she saw disturbed her more than she wanted to admit. He was respected. Not liked, maybe. His reputation was too cold for affection, but respected in the way you respected a particularly dangerous blade. Men nodded to him with careful courtesy. Women found reasons to be elsewhere when he approached. And through it all, Adrian moved with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly how much power he held, and felt no need to prove it. Evelyn, on his arm in a blue silk gown that cost more than her family's annual income used to be, felt like an imposter. They were introduced to what felt like 100 people whose names blurred together. Lord this, Lady that, all smiling with their mouths while their eyes performed calculations. How much is she worth? Is she breeding stock or decoration? Will this alliance shift the balance of power? Through it all, Adrian's hand rested on her lower back, possessive and controlling. Not violently, just constantly there, steering her, claiming her, making it clear to everyone watching that she belonged to him now. She wanted to scream. Instead, she smiled, curtsied, made appropriate small talk, played the role she'd been purchased to play. Until Lady Pemberton cornered her near the refreshment table. My dear Miss Marlowe, the woman was 60 if she was a day, draped in emeralds and condescension. Such a fortunate match for you. The Duke is quite the catch. Yes, Evelyn said flatly. Lucky me. Lady Pemberton's smile sharpened. Of course, there's quite an age difference. Some might say inappropriate. Some might say it's none of their business. The older woman's eyes glittered. Such spirit. I'm sure His Grace will temper that in time. He does have a reputation for discipline. Something in Evelyn snapped. Tell me, Lady Pemberton, she said sweetly, does being a miserable old cow come naturally, or did you have to practice? The woman's face went purple. Evelyn turned and walked away, heart pounding, waiting for consequences. They came swiftly. Adrian materialized at her elbow, smiled tightly at the few people nearby, and steered her toward a side hallway with the kind of grip that would leave bruises. Once they were alone, he released her and stepped back, face thunderous. What the hell was that? That was me refusing to be insulted by a woman who probably hasn't had an original thought since the Regency. You will apologize. I will not. His jaw worked. Miss Marlowe, my name is Evelyn. Use it. They stared at each other. The air between them felt electric, dangerous. You're making this impossible, Adrian said finally, and for the first time she heard something other than control in his voice. Frustration, maybe even exhaustion. Good, she shot back. You bought me. You don't get to like me too. Something flickered across his face, too fast to read. Then the mask came back down. We're leaving. He started toward the exit. Evelyn didn't move. What if I want to stay? He stopped, turned, walked back until he was close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Then stay, he said quietly. Dance with whichever gentleman asks. Drink champagne. Enjoy yourself. But understand this, every person in that ballroom is watching us, waiting for cracks. And the moment they see one, they'll rip this engagement apart for sport, and your family will be the collateral damage. He leaned in, and his voice dropped to something that wasn't quite a whisper, but felt more intimate than anything they'd shared. So by all means, stay. Prove to them I chose poorly. Let them see what I apparently paid for. It was the cruelest thing he could have said, and he knew it. Evelyn followed him to the carriage. They rode back to the estate in silence. Evelyn stared out the window at the dark countryside scrolling past and felt something inside her shift. Not soften, not forgive, just shift. Because she'd seen it just for a second, the exhaustion beneath the control. The man who'd built walls so high he'd trapped himself inside them. It didn't make her hate him less, but it made him human, which was somehow worse. When they arrived at Blackthorn Manor, Adrian disappeared immediately toward his study. Evelyn climbed the stairs to her chambers, let Lucy undress her in silence, and sat at the window until dawn. She was beginning to understand the shape of her prison. Not just the estate, not just the marriage, the entire system. A world where women were currency and men like Adrian Blackthorn could buy futures with the same casual efficiency they bought land. What she hadn't yet admitted, what she refused to admit, was that Adrian himself seemed just as trapped, just wearing more expensive chains. The turning point came on a Tuesday. Evelyn had been at Blackthorn Manor for 3 weeks. Her mother had departed a week earlier, tearful and relieved, freed from the responsibility of her daughter's misery. The wedding was now 3 weeks away. Invitations had been sent. A dress was being made. The machine of aristocratic marriage rolled forward with inexorable momentum. And Evelyn had run out of boundaries to test. She'd tried rebellion, confrontation, public humiliation. Adrian had countered every move with the same infuriating calm, deflecting her fury like water off stone. She couldn't hurt him because he refused to let her matter enough to hurt. So she tried something different. She started watching. Adrian kept a routine so precise you could set a watch by it. Up at 6, right at 6:30, breakfast at 7, estate business until noon, correspondence, tenant meetings, endless grinding work, dinner at 8, always alone, except for those terrible formal dinners where they performed their engagement for society. Then more work until midnight, sometimes later. He never rested, never relaxed. She never saw him read for pleasure or ride for joy or do anything that wasn't in service of duty. It was like watching someone slowly turn to stone. On Tuesday, she followed him. Not physically, he'd have noticed. But she tracked his movements through the house, learned his patterns. And that's how she discovered the portrait. It was in a small gallery off the west wing, a room she'd assumed was off limits because everything in that wing was off limits. But the door was ajar, and curiosity got the better of caution. The room was small, intimate, not a gallery so much as a shrine, and on the wall hung a single portrait of a woman. She was beautiful, truly, achingly beautiful, with dark hair and delicate features and eyes that seemed to follow you. The artist had caught her mid-laugh, head tilted, joy radiating from every brushstroke. At the bottom of the frame, a small plaque, Eleanor Blackthorn, 1808 to 1835. Evelyn stood frozen. My sister. She spun around. Adrian stood in the doorway, still in riding clothes, expression unreadable. I'm sorry, Evelyn stammered. I didn't mean to. She was 27. He walked into the room, moved to stand beside Evelyn in front of the portrait. Married a man I warned her against. Charming, irresponsible, cruel when it suited him. She wouldn't listen. Evelyn waited, afraid to breathe. He drained her accounts, destroyed her reputation, then abandoned her when society turned against them both. Adrian's voice was completely flat. She came to me for help. I refused, told her she'd made her choice and needed to live with it. 3 months later, she took laudanum. The silence that followed felt like falling. Evelyn looked at the portrait, at Eleanor's laughing eyes, and understood all of it, the control, the walls, the absolute refusal to let anyone close enough to matter. I was trying to teach her discipline, Adrian continued. Responsibility. I thought if I held firm, she'd learn. He paused. I was wrong. Evelyn's throat felt tight. I'm sorry. Don't be. He turned to her then, and his eyes were gray winter storms. Just understand that I will never make that mistake again. Sentiment is weakness. Love is a blade that cuts the person holding it. I learned that lesson at 28, and it cost me everything I valued. So you chose control instead. I chose survival. His voice was very quiet. And I suggest you do the same, Miss Marlowe. Accept the arrangement. Make peace with the future, because I have nothing else to offer you. He walked out. Evelyn stood alone with Eleanor's portrait and felt something crack inside her chest that she'd been holding together through sheer spite. Adrian Blackthorn wasn't a villain. He was a ghost, a man who died when his sister did and just hadn't bothered to stop breathing. And Evelyn was being tied for life to a beautiful corpse. That night she started planning her escape. Not physical. She wasn't stupid. Where would she go? No money, no prospects, nowhere to run except back to a family that had already sold her once. No, this escape would be quieter, more permanent. She would fulfill the arrangement, marry him, give him heirs if he wanted them, play Duchess for the rest of society. But inside, where it mattered, she would be gone. Shut down. A ghost married to a ghost, both of them performing life without actually living it. It was perfect, painless, the only survival available. She almost convinced herself she could do it. Then everything changed. It started with a letter, delivered at breakfast 3 days before the wedding. Adrian opened it, read 3 lines, and went very, very still. "What is it?" Evelyn asked, before remembering she'd decided not to care. He looked up. His face was carved from ice. "My cousin has contested my authority as Duke. He's claiming that my father's will was improperly executed and that the title should have passed through a different line. There will be an inquiry." Evelyn's stomach dropped. Can he do that? He's doing it. Adrian set down the letter with careful precision. And he's chosen to file the challenge 3 days before our wedding, which means he's trying to invalidate the marriage contract before it's executed. Why? Because if I'm not Duke, our arrangement is void. Your family's debts remain. His smile was terrible. And he gets Blackthorn. The room felt suddenly airless. What do we do? Adrian stood. You do nothing. This is my problem. But no? His voice cut like a whip. You've made it abundantly clear that you want nothing to do with this arrangement. Fine. I'll handle the legal challenge alone. If I lose, you're free. Consider it a gift. He walked out, leaving Evelyn sitting at the table, breakfast congealing in front of her, something howling inside her chest that felt dangerously like panic, because she'd just realized 2 things simultaneously. First, if Adrian lost the challenge, her family was destroyed. Utterly, completely destroyed. The debts would come due immediately. Her mother, her cousins, everyone, ruined. Second, and far more terrifying, she didn't want him to lose. Not because of the money, not even because of her family. Because somewhere in the last 3 weeks, between the arguments and the silence and the terrible, grinding loneliness of 2 people trapped in the same cage, she'd started to see Adrian Blackthorn as something other than her jailer. She'd started to see him as human, and that was more dangerous than anything else that had happened. Evelyn sat alone in the morning room and admitted a truth that tasted like betrayal. She didn't want to be free of him. She wanted to stand beside him when he faced whatever was coming, which meant she was either incredibly brave or catastrophically stupid. Probably both. She stood, smoothed her skirts, and went to find him. Not knowing that in the West Wing study, Adrian was staring at legal documents and making his own impossible discovery. That the thought of losing Evelyn Marlowe filled him with something that felt sickeningly like fear. The battle was coming. Neither of them was ready. But ready or not, everything was about to burn. Adrian's study was a fortress of dark wood and darker silence. Evelyn pushed through the door without knocking, her pulse hammering in her throat like something trying to escape. He stood at the window, back to her, one hand braced against the frame. The late morning light turned him into a silhouette, all sharp edges and rigid control. He didn't turn around. I told you to stay out of this, he said. And I told you I don't take orders well. Evelyn moved closer, her skirts whispering against the floor. What's the plan? There is no plan. His voice was flat. My cousin has legitimate grounds to challenge the succession. My father's will was executed during an illness, and there's precedent for invalidating documents signed under duress of failing health. So fight it. With what? He turned then, and she saw it. The exhaustion carving lines around his eyes. The shadow of something that might have been defeat. Legal challenges take months, sometimes years. The wedding is in 3 days. If I'm not confirmed as Duke by then, the marriage contract is void. Then we delay the wedding. Adrian laughed, and it was the ugliest sound she'd heard from him. Delay looks like weakness. Weakness invites more challenges. No. We either marry on schedule with my authority intact, or we don't marry at all. Evelyn's hands clenched into fists at her sides. You're giving up. I'm being realistic. You're being a coward. The word hung between them like a blade. Adrian's eyes went very cold, very still, and Evelyn realized she'd just crossed a line she couldn't see but could definitely feel. Careful, Miss Marlowe. Or what? She stepped closer, close enough to see the muscle jumping in his jaw. You'll dismiss me? Cancel the arrangement? That's already happening. So tell me, Your Grace, what exactly do I have to lose by calling you what you are? His hand shot out and gripped her wrist. Not violently, but firm enough that she gasped. They stood frozen, his fingers wrapped around her pulse point, her heartbeat jackrabbiting against his thumb. You think I'm afraid? His voice dropped to something dangerous. I've lost everything that mattered once already. I know exactly how to survive it. Then why aren't you fighting? Because fighting requires caring about the outcome. He released her wrist like it burned him. And I stopped caring about anything the day I buried my sister. Liar. The word came out before she could stop it, raw and certain. Adrian stared at her. You care, Evelyn pressed. That's why you're so goddamn controlled all the time. Because if you let yourself feel anything, it'll destroy you. Something flickered across his face, too fast to name. Then it was gone. Get out. No. Get out. Make me. They were standing too close, breathing too hard, and Evelyn could feel the electricity crackling in the air between them like a living thing. She'd pushed him to some edge she didn't understand, and part of her, the reckless, furious part that had kept her alive the past 3 weeks, wanted to see what happened when he finally broke. Adrian's hand came up, cupped her jaw. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, and the gesture was so unexpected, so gentle, that Evelyn froze. You don't know what you're asking, he said quietly. Then tell me. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he stepped back, dropped his hand, and the shutters came down over his expression. My cousin is hosting a gathering tomorrow night at his estate. All the families with voting rights in the peerage will be there. He's going to present his case publicly, force a preliminary vote before the wedding. That's barbaric. That's politics. Adrian moved to his desk, started gathering papers with mechanical precision. If I attend, I give his challenge legitimacy. If I don't attend, I look guilty. So we attend together. Evelyn's mind was racing. We show them a united front. Make it clear the marriage is happening regardless. United front. He looked at her. We can barely have breakfast without you throwing crockery. I'll behave. Will you? It wasn't a question. Evelyn lifted her chin. I can play the devoted fiancé when necessary. I may hate you, but I hate losing more. Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. Then you're more like me than I thought. Is that supposed to be a compliment? Take it however you want. He returned to his papers. We leave at 7 tomorrow. Dress appropriately. This isn't a garden party. Evelyn turned to go, then paused at the door. Adrian. He looked up. Don't give up, she said, even if you think you don't care. Don't give him the satisfaction. She left before he could respond, her heart doing strange things in her chest that she refused to examine too closely. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation that felt like arming for war. Mrs. Garrick appeared in Evelyn's chambers with a selection of gowns that made her previous wardrobe look like practice runs. Deep emerald silk, midnight blue velvet, a black creation with silver embroidery that probably cost more than a horse. This one, the housekeeper said, indicating the black gown. It's bold, memorable. It's a funeral dress. Exactly. Mrs. Garrick's eyes were sharp. You're bearing the idea that you're a frightened girl who can be pushed aside. Wear it. Evelyn studied the older woman. Why are you helping me? Because I've served this house for 30 years, and I've never seen His Grace give a damn about anyone until you walked through that door making his life hell. Mrs. Garrick smoothed the black silk. Don't prove me wrong. She left. Evelyn stared at the gown and tried to convince herself she wasn't about to do something catastrophically stupid. Adrian's cousin lived in a manor that tried very hard to compete with Blackthorn and failed spectacularly. Too much gilding, too many columns, architecture that screamed new money pretending to be old. Carriages lined the drive, torches blazed in the growing dusk. Every important family in the county had turned out for the show. Evelyn descended from the carriage on Adrian's arm, the black gown pooling around her feet like an oil slick. She'd let Lucy arrange her hair in an elaborate updo that made her look older, more severe. War paint, she'd thought while watching her reflection. Armor. Adrian wore full formal dress, all black and white precision, looking every inch the Duke he was trying to remain. His hand on her lower back was steady, possessive, the same gesture he'd used at the Haversham ball. But this time, Evelyn leaned into it instead of fighting. People noticed. She could feel their eyes tracking the movement, the whispers starting. Adrian noticed too. His fingers spread wider against her spine, claiming the territory. "Remember," he murmured as they approached the entrance, "you're not here to make friends." "Good. I wasn't planning on it." They walked into a ballroom already buzzing with anticipation. The crowd parted like water, conversations dying as they passed. Evelyn kept her chin up, her expression serene, playing the role she'd been purchased for. Duchess. Ice Queen. Woman who belonged on a duke's arm. Halfway across the room, a man detached from a cluster of nobles and moved to intercept them. He was perhaps 40, handsome in a dissolute way, with Adrian's height but none of his discipline. This had to be the cousin. "Adrian." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "How kind of you to attend." "Marcus." Adrian's voice could have frozen wine. "Shall we dispense with pleasantries?" "Of course." Marcus's gaze slid to Evelyn, and she felt him assess her the way men had been assessing her all her life, calculating her value, her utility, her weaknesses. "And this must be the unfortunate Miss Marlowe. My condolences on your impending nuptials." Evelyn smiled. "Save your condolences for yourself. You'll need them." Marcus blinked. Adrian's hand tightened on her back. Warning or approval, she couldn't tell. "Spirited," Marcus said. "I can see why you chose her, cousin, though I wonder if spirit is enough to sustain a marriage built on financial desperation." The crowd had gone silent now, watching. "I wonder," Evelyn said pleasantly, "if legal challenges are enough to compensate for inadequacy. But I suppose we'll find out." Adrian made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Marcus's face darkened. "Enjoy your evening," he said, "both of you, while it lasts." He walked away. Evelyn's legs felt like water, but she kept her expression calm. "That was reckless," Adrian murmured. "That was necessary." They moved deeper into the ballroom. More stairs. More whispers. Evelyn could feel the weight of judgment pressing down from all sides. These people who'd built empires on bloodlines and tradition. Watching an upstart girl from a ruined family dare to stand beside one of them. She wanted to burn the whole room down. Instead, she smiled, nodded, played Duchess. An hour in, Marcus called for attention. The crowd quieted. He stood near the fireplace, surrounded by men who'd clearly been briefed on their roles in this theater. "My friends," Marcus began, voice carrying across the room. "We gather tonight not in celebration, but in concern. Concern for the integrity of our peerage, for the sanctity of succession law." "Here it comes," Adrian muttered. "I don't make this challenge lightly," Marcus continued. "But when I discovered irregularities in the late Duke's will, a document executed while he was gravely ill, witnessed by servants rather than peers, sealed in haste, I could not in good conscience remain silent." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Adrian's face could have been carved from marble. "The Blackthorn title is one of our oldest. It deserves to pass to the rightful heir, not to whoever happened to be present when a dying man's hand was guided to paper." "That's a lie," Evelyn hissed. Adrian's hand on her back pressed harder. "Not here." "My father was of sound mind," Adrian said, voice carrying. "The witnesses were legitimate. This challenge is nothing more than—" "Then you won't mind a formal inquiry?" Marcus smiled. "Starting immediately. Before any marriage contracts are executed, that might complicate succession." The trap closed. Evelyn could see it in the faces around them, the nobles who cared less about justice than about spectacle, already choosing sides based on who offered better alliances. "You bastard," she breathed. Adrian stood very still. Then he did something Evelyn didn't expect. He laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was the sound of a man who'd just decided to stop playing by rules that were rigged against him anyway. "An inquiry," Adrian said. "Fine. Let's have one. Full investigation. Every document, every witness. Complete transparency." Marcus's smile faltered. "And while we're investigating," Adrian continued, "perhaps we should examine how you've been managing the Blackthorn Northern estates these past 5 years. The ones my father entrusted to you. I have ledgers that show some interesting discrepancies." The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. "I'm sure it's nothing," Adrian said pleasantly. "Just a few £100,000 unaccounted for. Barely worth mentioning." Marcus's face had gone white. "You wouldn't. Try me." They stared at each other across the ballroom. and Evelyn realized she was watching something far older and more vicious than a legal challenge. This was family, destroying family, blood eating blood. "The Duke and I will be married as scheduled," Evelyn heard herself say. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Whatever inquiry you wish to conduct can proceed afterward, but the marriage will take place in 2 days." Every eye turned to her. She felt Adrian's surprise, but she kept her gaze locked on Marcus. "Unless, of course," she continued, "you'd like to publicly admit that your challenge is less about succession law and more about your own embezzlement." The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus recovered first, but his smile was strained. "This isn't over." "No," Adrian agreed. "It's not. But it won't end the way you planned." He turned, hand still on Evelyn's back, and guided her toward the exit. The crowd parted. Behind them, the whispers exploded like gunfire. They made it to the carriage before Adrian spoke. "What the hell was that?" "That was me saving your ungrateful ass." Evelyn climbed in, her hands shaking now that adrenaline was fading. "You're welcome." Adrian followed her, closed the door, and the carriage lurched forward. In the confined space, she could feel him looking at her. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." "Why?" "Because he was going to win." Evelyn turned to face him. "And I couldn't stand watching you let him." Adrian's expression was unreadable. "You realize what this means. We're committed now. No backing out." "I know. 2 days. We'll be married." "I know. And you're willing to bind yourself to this?" His gesture encompassed everything: the estate, the title, him. "To me." Evelyn's throat felt tight. She thought about Eleanor's portrait, about the ghost Adrian had been carrying for 11 years, about the loneliness that soaked through Blackthorn Manor like damp. "I'm willing to try not being alone anymore," she said finally, "even if it's with you." Something shifted in his face, not quite warmth, but something close. The beginning of thaw. "I don't know how to do this," he said quietly. "How to be less than I am." "You mean less controlled, less dead." The honesty hit her like a physical blow. Evelyn looked at this man who'd been her jailer, her enemy, her unwanted future, and saw suddenly what he must have seen in the mirror every morning. Someone so afraid of loss that he'd amputated every part of himself capable of feeling. "Then don't," she said. "Don't be less. Just be different. With me." Adrian studied her face in the dim carriage light. Then he reached out, very slowly, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was achingly gentle. "You're terrifying," he said. "Good." She managed a smile. "So are you." They rode the rest of the way in silence, but it wasn't the cold silence of strangers. It was something else, something new and fragile and dangerous as hell. The wedding took place on a Thursday morning that dawned gray and threatening rain. Evelyn woke before sunrise, her stomach a knot of nerves. Lucy helped her into the gown that had been made. Cream silk with seed pearls, modest and elegant, and everything a ducal bride should wear. Her reflection in the mirror looked like someone else, someone older, someone ready. She barely recognized herself. The ceremony would be small, held in the private chapel on Blackthorn grounds. Just family and a few witnesses. Marcus had been noticeably absent from the guest list. Adrian had made sure of that. Evelyn descended the stairs alone. Her mother had returned the previous day, tearful and relieved, but Evelyn had kept her at arm's length. This wasn't about Catherine's redemption. This was about survival. The chapel was cold, lit by candles that cast dancing shadows across stone walls. Adrian stood at the altar in formal dress, looking exactly as controlled as always. But when Evelyn walked down the aisle toward him, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or fear. The minister began speaking, Latin phrases Evelyn barely registered. She was too busy watching Adrian's face, looking for cracks in the facade. "Do you take this woman?" "I do." His voice was steady. "Do you take this man?" Evelyn looked at the man she was about to legally bind herself to for life. The ghost. The fortress. The walking wound who'd bought her because he was too broken to risk loving anyone he hadn't purchased. "I do." The words came out clear. Certain. Adrian slid a ring onto her finger. Heavy gold, old Blackthorn heirloom, claiming her as permanently as a brand. His hands were steady. Hers were shaking. You may kiss the bride. Adrian leaned in. His lips brushed hers, cool and formal, a gesture for the witnesses. But Evelyn felt something electric pass between them anyway, a current that had nothing to do with duty. When he pulled back, his eyes held a question. She didn't have an answer yet. The wedding breakfast was torture disguised as celebration. They sat at the head of a table filled with relatives Evelyn didn't know and Adrian clearly despised, making polite conversation while servants brought course after course of food that tasted like ash. Her mother wept into her napkin. An elderly aunt made comments about airs that bordered on obscene. Adrian's hand found Evelyn's under the table, squeezed once, and she realized with a jolt that he was just as miserable as she was. They were prisoners at their own wedding. Finally, mercifully, it ended. The guests departed. Catherine kissed Evelyn's cheek and whispered something about duty that Evelyn ignored. And then they were alone, standing in the entrance hall of Blackthorn Manor as husband and wife. Adrian looked at her. I have work to finish. Of course you do. Unless, he paused, you'd prefer I stayed. Evelyn's pulse jumped. What would we do if you stayed? I have no idea. His mouth quirked. I've never been married before, neither have I. She stepped closer. We could figure it out. We could. They stood there, barely a foot apart, and Evelyn could feel the weight of expectation pressing down. Wedding night, consummation. All the things proper marriages required. Her stomach knotted with fear she refused to show. Adrian must have seen it anyway because he stepped back. You look exhausted, he said. Rest. We have time, do we? Yes. His voice was firm. We do. He turned toward his study. Evelyn watched him go and felt something like gratitude war with something like disappointment. This was her husband, this controlled, damaged, impossible man. And she had no idea what came next. What came next was 3 days of the strangest ceasefire Evelyn had ever experienced. They dined together now, formal dinners where they maintained polite conversation. They attended social obligations as a united front, playing Duchess and Duke for an audience that watched for cracks. They existed in the same space, orbiting each other like binary stars, never colliding, never escaping each other's gravity. But at night, Adrian retreated to his chambers, and Evelyn slept alone in hers. On the 4th night, she stopped pretending she was fine with it. She found him in his study past midnight, bent over ledgers in candlelight. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his face. Can't sleep? He asked. Evelyn closed the door behind her. Why haven't you touched me? The question hung in the air like a grenade. Adrian set down his pen very carefully. I thought you'd prefer privacy. That's not an answer, isn't it? She moved closer. I'm your wife. We've been married 4 days. People are going to talk. Let them. You don't care? Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying her. What do you want me to say, Evelyn? That I'm dying to consummate a marriage you were forced into? That I can't wait to claim what I purchased? His voice was sharp enough to draw blood. Evelyn flinched. I want you to be honest, she said. Fine. Honest. He stood, and there was something dangerous in the movement. I don't want to become another man who takes what he wants because the law says he can. I watched my sister destroyed by someone who did exactly that. So yes, I'm giving you privacy. I'm giving you choice. If that's a problem, tell me now. It's not a problem. Then what is it? Evelyn's hands clenched at her sides. I don't know. She struggled for words. I thought marriage was supposed to mean something. It does. It means you're safe here, provided for, protected. That's not what I mean. Then what do you mean? She looked at him. This man who'd built walls so high he couldn't see over them anymore, who'd locked himself away so completely he'd forgotten what it felt like to be touched, and felt something crack open inside her chest. I mean, I'm tired of being alone, she said quietly. Even when you're in the same room, I'm alone. We both are. Adrian went very still. The candlelight carved shadows across his face. I don't know how to be anything else, he said finally. Then learn. How? Evelyn stepped forward, close enough to see his pulse jumping at his throat. By letting me in, by trusting that I won't destroy you the way she did. She, Eleanor. The ghost between them. She destroyed herself, Adrian said roughly. I just failed to save her, so you decided never to care about anyone again. Yes, that's not strength. Her voice shook. That's cowardice. His hand shot out, gripped her wrist. Not violently, but firm. They stood frozen, connected by that single point of contact, both breathing too hard. You think you know me, he said. I think you're terrified. Of what? Of this. She pulled her wrist free, then did something reckless. She closed the last distance between them and pressed her palm flat against his chest, right over his heart. A feeling something again. Adrian looked down at her hand like it was a loaded weapon. Evelyn, he said, and there was a warning in it. I'm scared too, she whispered. I'm terrified. But I'd rather be terrified and trying than safe and dead inside. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then his hand came up, covered hers against his chest. His heart was hammering. If I let you in, he said quietly, and I fail you the way I failed her, then we fail together. Evelyn looked up at him. But at least we won't be alone. Something broke in his expression. He pulled her against him suddenly, almost violently, his arms coming around her like he was afraid she'd disappear. Evelyn gasped, then softened into the embrace. They stood there in the candlelit study, holding each other like drowning people, and Evelyn felt the last of her defenses start to crumble. This was dangerous. This was stupid. This was the only thing that felt real since she'd arrived. Adrian's hand slid into her hair, tilted her face up. His eyes were storm gray, wild. Tell me to stop, he said. No. He kissed her then, and it wasn't gentle. It was desperate, hungry. 11 years of loneliness and fear and need pouring into a single point of contact. Evelyn kissed him back just as fiercely, her fingers digging into his shoulders, claiming him the way he'd been trying so hard not to claim her. When they broke apart, both gasping, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I don't know how to do this, he said. Neither do I. She was shaking. So we learn. Together. Together. Yes, morning came too fast and not fast enough. Evelyn woke in Adrian's bed, their bed now, with sunlight streaming through windows and the unfamiliar weight of another person beside her. For a moment, panic seized her. What had she done? What had they done? Then Adrian's arm tightened around her waist, and she remembered. She'd chosen this, chosen him. God help them both. He was already awake, she realized, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Regrets? He asked quietly. Evelyn considered lying, decided against it. Hundreds, she said. But not about last night. Something like relief crossed his face. Good. Are you going to disappear into your study now? Probably. He brushed hair back from her face. Old habits. Try new ones. Such as, stay. Just for a while. Adrian studied her, then made a decision she saw across his face in real time. He settled back against the pillows, pulling her with him. They lay there in the morning light. Two people who'd married out of duty and were only now discovering what that duty might actually mean. Not love. Not yet. But something. The possibility of something. It was more than either of them had expected. It was terrifying. But the knock came at noon. They were still in bed, scandalous, improper, exactly what newlyweds were supposed to do, but Adrian never had with anyone. Evelyn was dozing against his chest when Mrs. Garrick's voice came through the door. Your Grace. Urgent correspondence. Adrian tensed. He extracted himself carefully, threw on a robe, and opened the door just wide enough to accept the letter. Evelyn watched him read it, watched his expression go from relaxed to rigid in 3 seconds. What is it? Marcus. Adrian's voice was ice. He's filed an emergency petition with the House of Lords, calling for immediate suspension of my ducal authority pending the inquiry. Can he do that? He just did. Adrian crushed the letter in his fist. They've set a hearing for Monday, 4 days. Evelyn sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. What happens if they rule against you? I lose everything. The title, the estates, the authority. He looked at her. Our marriage remains valid, but you'd be married to a commoner carrying a contested name. So we fight. With what army? Adrian's laugh was bitter. Half the peerage is already siding with him. The other half is waiting to see which way the wind blows. I'm alone in this. No. Evelyn stood, wrapped in the sheet like armor. You're not. Adrian turned to look at her, really look, and she saw the moment he understood what she was offering. Not just support. Partnership, alliance. This could destroy you too, he said. If they strip my title, your family's restoration means nothing. You'd be right back where you started. I know. And you'd still fight? Evelyn thought about the girl who'd arrived 4 weeks ago, terrified and furious, convinced she was going to her own funeral. Thought about the woman she was becoming, harder, sharper, unafraid. I married a duke, she said, but I'm standing with a man. If that man loses his title, I'll still be standing. Adrian crossed the room in 3 strides, cupped her face in both hands, and kissed her like she was oxygen and he was drowning. When he pulled back, his eyes were fierce. Then we fight, he said. Together. Together. They had 4 days to save everything. It wasn't enough time, but it was all they had. The war room became the library. Adrian had maps spread across every available surface within an hour of receiving Marcus's petition. Estate records, legal precedents, correspondence spanning 3 decades. Evelyn watched him work with the focused intensity of a general planning a campaign, his mind already 10 moves ahead while she was still trying to understand the board. We need allies, he said without looking up. Peers who'll vote against the suspension. Do you have any? A few. Maybe. Adrian's jaw tightened. The problem is Marcus has been working this angle for months. I've been absent from court politics. Because you were grieving. Because I was hiding. He finally looked at her. There's a difference. Evelyn moved to the desk, studied the names he'd been circling. Who are these? Possible votes. Lord Ashford owes me money. The Earl of Pemberton's son got into trouble last year that I helped cover up. Lady Whitmore. The woman from the ball? The one I insulted? Adrian's mouth twitched. Yes, that one. She'll never vote for you now. Probably not. He crossed her name off, which leaves us with maybe 8 solid votes out of 30 required. The math was brutal. Evelyn felt something cold settle in her stomach. What about leverage? She asked. You threatened Marcus with embezzlement charges. Can we use that? Not without proof that would stand up in Lords. And getting that proof requires access to records Marcus now controls. Adrian threw down his pen. We're fighting with one hand tied behind our backs. Then we untie it. How? Evelyn thought about the past 4 weeks, about watching Adrian navigate society, about the careful distance he maintained from everyone, the walls he'd built so high he couldn't see the people who might actually help him. You said you've been absent from court, she said slowly. So let's make an entrance. A real one. Such as? A dinner party. Tomorrow night. Here. Invite every peer whose vote we need and make them remember why the Blackthorns matter. Adrian stared at her. You want to throw a party while we're under legal siege? I want to remind them that you're still Duke, that this estate, this power, this legacy, it's real and present, and Marcus is just noise. She leaned forward. People respect strength. Show them you're not afraid. I am afraid. Then lie better. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. You're terrifying, he said. You keep saying that, because it keeps being true. He stood, moved around the desk until he was close enough to touch. If we do this, we're all in. No retreat. I thought we established that this morning. This is different. This is war. I know. Evelyn met his eyes. I'm ready. Are you? She thought about the girl she'd been a month ago, thought about what she'd become. Hard, sharp, a blade forged in necessity. Ask me again after we win. All right. Mrs. Garrick took the news like a field marshal receiving orders. Tomorrow night. 30 guests. Full formal dinner with dancing afterward. The housekeeper didn't even blink. I'll need to bring in additional staff. Do it, Adrian said. Spare no expense. And the menu? Ask the Duchess. He glanced at Evelyn. This is her campaign. Mrs. Garrick's eyes flickered with something that might have been approval. Your Grace? Evelyn's mind raced. She'd attended hundreds of dinners, but never planned one, never understood the political calculus that went into seating arrangements and wine selections. But she understood theater. She understood how to make an entrance. 7 courses, she said. French service. The best wines from the cellar. And I want the dining room to look like old money incarnate. Make them remember the Blackthorns built this country before their families stopped scraping mud off their boots. Mrs. Garrick's mouth curved. It will be done. She swept out. Adrian looked at Evelyn with something close to wonder. Old money incarnate? You don't think like nobility, Evelyn said. You think like someone who deserves it. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. One makes you a duke, the other makes you a king. I'm not trying to be a king. No. She stepped closer. You're trying to survive. But survival isn't enough anymore. We need to win so decisively they're afraid to challenge you again. And you think one dinner will do that? I think one dinner will remind them what they stand to lose if they side with Marcus. She held his gaze. Everyone at that table will have something to protect. Lands, titles, secrets. We just need to make them understand that you're the one who can protect it. Or destroy it. Exactly. Adrian studied her face for a long moment. When did you get so ruthless? When I married you. Probably before. Evelyn felt something twist in her chest. Survival changes people. Yes. His voice was quiet. It does. The invitations went out by noon, hand-delivered by servants with instructions to wait for responses. Evelyn spent the afternoon in a whirlwind of preparation that felt like arming for battle. Dress selection, menu approval, reviewing the guest list until she had every name and title memorized. By evening, the responses had started coming back. Lord Ashford accepted. So did the Earl of Pemberton and 6 others. But a troubling number sent regrets. Polite, apologetic, utterly transparent. They were afraid. Marcus had them scared enough to avoid even appearing sympathetic to Adrian's cause. Evelyn was reading through the latest rejection when Adrian found her in the drawing room. How many? He asked. 18 confirmed. She set down the letter. 12 declined. That's not enough. I know. They stood in silence, the weight of mathematics pressing down. 18 votes wouldn't carry the day. They needed at least 25 to block the suspension, and even that assumed every guest voted their way. We need something else, Evelyn said, something bigger than dinner. Such as? She thought about power, about what actually moved people in this world. Not honor, not loyalty. Fear and greed, always fear and greed. What if we forced Marcus to show his hand early? She asked slowly. Adrian frowned. How? By making him think he's already won. She started pacing, mind racing. What if we let it leak that you're considering stepping down? Negotiating a quiet exit in exchange for keeping the estates. I'd never... I know. But Marcus doesn't. And if he thinks you're weak, he might overplay his position. Get cocky. Make mistakes. Adrian's eyes narrowed. You want to set a trap. I want to give him enough rope to hang himself. It's risky. Everything's risky. Evelyn stopped in front of him. But if we can get him to reveal what he's really after, the money, the power, whatever, we can use it against him at the hearing, and if it doesn't work, then we're exactly where we are now, which is losing. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, do it. The leak was delivered through a servant Marcus had likely bribed, a footman Adrian had suspected for weeks but kept in place precisely for moments like this. By midnight, word would be all over London that the Duke of Blackthorn was considering surrender. Now they waited to see who took the bait. Evelyn couldn't sleep. She paced her chambers, their chambers now, that still felt strange, until Adrian appeared in the doorway. Stop thinking so loud, he said. I can hear you from down the hall. I can't help it. Come here. She went to him, let him pull her close. They stood like that for a while, just breathing together, finding equilibrium in the chaos. What if this doesn't work? She whispered. Then we try something else. And if everything fails, Adrian pulled back to look at her. Then I lose the title, the estates, everything, except me. His hand came up to cup her face. Except you. Is that enough? It has to be. They kissed, desperate and hungry, 2 people clinging to each other in the face of approaching disaster. When they broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "I never expected this," he said quietly. "What?" "You. Caring whether I survive." His voice was rough. "I bought you thinking I'd get an ornament and an heir. Instead, I got a partner who's more ruthless than I am." "Is that a complaint?" "It's wonder." Evelyn felt something crack in her chest. "Don't make me care about you, not when we might lose everything." "Too late." He kissed her again, for both of us. The dinner party began at 8 with an entrance designed to intimidate. Evelyn descended the grand staircase wearing midnight blue velvet and every piece of blackthorn jewelry Adrian could drape on her. Sapphires at her throat, diamonds in her hair, rings that weighed heavy enough to remind her they were weapons. She looked like conquest given form. Adrian waited at the bottom of the stairs in full formal dress, looking every inch the Duke that Marcus was trying to strip from him. When she took his arm, she felt him steady. "Ready?" he murmured. "To burn it all down if necessary." "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." They entered the dining room together. The effect was immediate. 18 peers and their wives had been arranged at a table that probably cost more than a small manor. Candlelight gleamed off crystal and silver. The room smelled of money and power and old blood. Everyone stood as Adrian and Evelyn entered. A few faces showed sympathy. Most showed calculation. All of them were wondering which side would win. "Be seated," Adrian said, voice carrying. Dinner progressed like a chess match disguised as civility. 7 courses of political maneuvering, alliances being tested, loyalties being weighed. Evelyn worked the table like a conductor, steering conversation away from dangerous topics and toward common ground. "Lord Ashford," she said during the 4th course, "I understand your estate's border Blackthorn lands in the north. Has the drainage project been beneficial?" Ashford looked surprised to be addressed directly. "Very much so, Your Grace. The flooding last spring would have been catastrophic without it. A project His Grace funded personally, I believe." "Yes." Ashford's eyes flickered to Adrian. "At considerable expense, because good neighbors invest in each other's prosperity." Evelyn smiled. "I'm sure that's a principle everyone at this table understands." The message was clear. Adrian had been a good neighbor. Siding against him had consequences. By the 6th course, she'd worked similar magic on 4 other guests, reminding them of favors owed, disasters averted, kindnesses they'd forgotten. Adrian played his part perfectly. Not pleading, not desperate, just present, powerful. The man they'd all known for years, now with a wife sharp enough to cut glass standing beside him. It was working. Evelyn could feel it in the way conversations were shifting, the way uncertain guests were starting to lean their direction. Then Marcus arrived. He appeared between courses, walking into the dining room like he owned it, which, technically, he might soon. He wore formal dress and a smile that made Evelyn's skin crawl. "Adrian." The room went silent. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I heard you were hosting and couldn't resist paying my respects." Adrian's hand tightened on his wine glass, but his voice stayed level. "Marcus, what a surprise." "Is it?" Marcus moved to the head of the table, standing just behind Adrian's chair in a position of dominance so obvious it was insulting. "I thought family would be welcome. Family doesn't usually try to destroy each other in court. That depends on the family." Marcus's gaze swept the table. "Though I'm touched by this gathering, so many friends showing support in your time of trial." Evelyn felt ice slide down her spine. Something was wrong. Marcus was too confident, too pleased, like he knew something they didn't. "Actually," Marcus continued, "I'm glad you're all here. Saves me the trouble of delivering this news individually." He pulled a document from his coat. "I've just received confirmation from the Lord Chancellor's office. The preliminary hearing has been moved up." Adrian went very still. "Moved up to when?" "Tomorrow. 10 o'clock. Marcus smiled. Given certain new evidence that's come to light, they felt it was best to expedite matters. "What evidence?" Evelyn demanded. Marcus's eyes slid to her, cold and amused. "Why? Evidence of fraud, Your Grace. It seems the late Duke's will wasn't just improperly executed, it was actively falsified. By His Grace himself." The room exploded into whispers. Adrian's face had gone white. "That's a lie," he said. "Is it?" Marcus dropped the document on the table. A witness has come forward, someone who was present when you forced your dying father to change the will in your favor, someone who can testify you threatened him with disinheritance if he didn't name you sole heir. Adrian stood so fast his chair fell backward. Who? Marcus's smile widened. Your father's personal physician, Dr. Whitmore. I believe you know him well. Evelyn's blood turned to ice. Whitmore. The same family as Lady Whitmore, the woman she'd insulted at the ball. The woman whose vote they'd lost. This was a setup. All of it. The room was chaos now. Guests rising, talking over each other, some already moving toward the exits. The alliance they'd been building crumbled in real time. Adrian just stood there, frozen, watching everything he'd built collapse around him. I think this dinner is concluded, Marcus said pleasantly. Unless anyone has objections to the truth finally coming to light. No one spoke. They were already leaving, distancing themselves from Adrian before the scandal could touch them. Within 10 minutes, the dining room was empty except for Adrian, Evelyn, and Marcus. Marcus looked at them both, victorious. You should have negotiated when you had the chance, he said. Now you'll lose everything. The title, the estates, and quite possibly your freedom once the fraud charges are fully investigated. He headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Evelyn? That was a beautiful trap you tried to set with the surrender rumors. Very clever. But I've been planning this for 2 years. You've been playing for 2 days. He left. The door closed with a sound like a coffin sealing. Evelyn turned to Adrian. He was staring at the empty table, face carved from stone. Say something, she whispered. I need to think. Adrian, I need to think. His voice cracked on the last word. Please. He walked out, leaving Evelyn alone in the ruins of their war room. So, she found him an hour later in the gallery with Eleanor's portrait. He stood in front of it, perfectly still, and Evelyn knew without asking that he was talking to his dead sister, asking for guidance, or forgiveness, or both. She stayed in the doorway, afraid to intrude. He knew, Adrian said finally, not turning around. Marcus knew about my father's illness, about the will, about Whitmore being there. He knew everything because I told him. When? 11 years ago, right after Eleanor died. Adrian's voice was hollow. I was drowning. Marcus was the only family I had left who'd speak to me. So I told him everything. How I'd pushed father to change the will, to cut out the cousins who'd encouraged Eleanor's disastrous marriage. How I'd been ruthless and calculated and everything I've always been. That doesn't make the will invalid. No. But it makes me look guilty. And Whitmore's testimony will make it worse. He finally turned to look at her. I handed Marcus the knife he's using to gut me. 11 years ago, I handed it to him. Evelyn's throat felt tight. We can fight this. How? Everyone saw Marcus tonight, saw the document. By morning, all of London will know. The hearing is in. He checked his watch. 9 hours. We have nothing. We have truth. Truth is what people believe. Adrian moved away from the portrait. And right now they believe I'm a fraud. So we make them believe something else. There's no time. Then we make time. Evelyn grabbed his arm, forced him to look at her. You're giving up again. Just like you did when Eleanor died. Just like you always do when things get hard. His eyes flashed. You know nothing about, I know you're a coward. The words came out like bullets. I know you hide behind control and discipline and rules because you're terrified of actually fighting for something that matters. You buy things, Adrian. You bought me. You bought this title. You bought peace by cutting yourself off from everyone. But you don't fight for anything. That's not fair, isn't it? When have you ever fought for something you couldn't control? When have you ever risked actual failure? Adrian's face was white with fury. I risk failure every day. No. You risk controlled loss, calculated defeat. You manage catastrophe. Evelyn's voice shook. But tomorrow requires you to actually fight, and you don't know how because you've spent 11 years making sure you never care enough about anything to be destroyed by losing it. And what would you have me do? Adrian's voice was raw. Storm into Lords and demand they believe me? Threaten Whitmore? Stage a coup? I'd have you care. She stepped closer. I'd have you fight like your life depends on it, instead of like you're already dead. They stared at each other, breathing hard, everything between them stripped raw and bleeding. "I can't lose this," Adrian whispered. "The title, the estates, it's all I have." "No, it's not." Evelyn's eyes burned. "You have me." "For how long?" His laugh was broken. "You're here because you were bought, because your family needed saving. When this collapses, what possible reason would you have to stay?" The question hit like a physical blow. Evelyn opened her mouth to answer, then stopped, because the truth was complicated and messy, and she wasn't sure she understood it herself. She'd married him for duty. She'd stayed for survival. But somewhere in the past weeks, something had shifted. She cared. God help her. She actually cared what happened to this broken, impossible man. "I don't know," she said finally. "Maybe I'm as much a coward as you are. Maybe I'll run the second this falls apart. Maybe survival is all I've got left, too." Adrian's face did something complicated. "Or maybe," Evelyn continued, voice shaking, "we're both so goddamn terrified of being destroyed that we'll destroy ourselves first just to maintain control." She turned to leave. His hand caught her wrist. "Don't," he said. "Don't what?" "Leave. Give up on me. Walk away." His voice broke. "I know I don't deserve it. I know you have every reason to cut your losses and go, but please, don't." Evelyn looked at where his hand circled her wrist, at the desperation in his eyes, and felt something inside her chest crack completely open. "Then fight," she whispered. "Not for the title, not for the estates. Fight because you want to, because you still can." Adrian pulled her against him, buried his face in her hair. She felt him shaking. "I don't know how," he said into her shoulder. "Then learn." Her arms came around him. "We have 9 hours. Let's use them." Whooped. They spent the night building a strategy from rubble. Dr. Whitmore was the key. If Marcus had his testimony, they needed to discredit it or find their own witnesses to counter it. Evelyn sent servants racing through the night to track down anyone who'd been present during the late Duke's final days. By 3 a.m, they had 2 names: a solicitor who'd reviewed the will, a nurse who'd attended the Duke in his final weeks. Both were in London. Both could potentially testify. It wasn't much, but it was something. Adrian worked on his defense, drafting responses to every possible accusation Marcus might level. Evelyn watched him transform back into the man she'd seen at Marcus's gathering: cold, precise, dangerous. The Duke instead of the ghost. At dawn, Mrs. Garrick appeared with coffee and news. "The solicitor will testify," she said. "The nurse is willing but frightened. She'll need assurance of protection." "She'll have it," Adrian said without looking up. "Whatever she needs. There's more." Mrs. Garrick's expression was grim. "Word has spread about Dr. Whitmore's testimony. Several peers who'd been on the fence have now declared for Marcus. The votes aren't there. How many do we have? 8 confirmed. Maybe 10 if we're lucky. We need 25. "I know, Your Grace." The math was brutal. Even with the witnesses, even with Adrian's defense, they were going to lose. Evelyn looked at the man she'd married, brilliant and broken and fighting for survival in a game rigged against him, and made a decision. "Get me a carriage," she told Mrs. Garrick. Adrian looked up. "What are you doing?" Something ruthless. She was already moving toward the door. "Trust me." "Evelyn," I said, "trust me." She left before he could argue. Lady Whitmore's London residence was a monument to wealth without taste. Too many columns, too much gilding, the kind of house that screamed new money trying desperately to pass for old. Evelyn was shown into a drawing room that could have housed a small family. Lady Whitmore sat near the fire, dressed in mourning finery, looking entirely unsurprised by the visit. "Your Grace," the older woman's voice dripped condescension. "What an unexpected pleasure." "Is it?" Evelyn remained standing. "Let's dispense with pleasantries. Your brother-in-law is testifying against my husband. I'm here to find out why. He's testifying to the truth. He's lying, and we both know it." Lady Whitmore's expression didn't change. Such certainty. "Tell me, do you always defend men who insult you, or just the ones you've married?" The reference to their first meeting landed like a slap. Evelyn refused to flinch. "I defended myself then, and I'm defending my family now," she said. "The question is whether you're willing to destroy a man over a social slight. This has nothing to do with you." "Then what does it have to do with?" "Justice." Lady Whitmore's eyes were cold. Your husband destroyed my daughter's engagement last year, spread rumors about her reputation that made her unmarriageable, all because her fiancé had sided against him in some business dispute. Evelyn's stomach dropped. She hadn't known this. Adrian had never mentioned it. My daughter lives in shame because of him, Lady Whitmore continued. So yes, when Marcus approached my family with evidence of his grace's corruption, we were more than willing to help. Evidence he manufactured, or evidence that's true and you're too blinded by newlywed sentiment to see it. Evelyn's hands clenched. What would it take for you to withdraw your brother's testimony? There's nothing you could offer. Are you sure? Evelyn stepped closer. Because I can think of several things, starting with the fact that your husband's investments in the Manchester Mills are failing. You're 6 months from bankruptcy. Lady Whitmore's face went white. How dare you? I dare because I've spent the past 2 weeks learning everything about everyone who might vote against us. Your family is drowning in debt. Adrian could save you, or he could let you sink. That's extortion. That's survival. Evelyn's voice was steel. The same thing you're doing by backing Marcus. So let's be honest with each other. You want your daughter's reputation restored and your finances secured. I want Dr. Whitmore to recant his testimony. That's impossible. He's already filed sworn statements. Nothing's impossible. Just expensive. Evelyn held the woman's gaze. Name your price. Lady Whitmore studied her for a long moment. Then she stood, moved to her writing desk, and pulled out a ledger. These are my debts, she said. £60,000, plus a formal apology from His Grace to my daughter and a guarantee that her reputation will be publicly restored within the month. Done. Just like that? Just like that. Evelyn's heart was hammering. Do we have an accord? Lady Whitmore looked at her, and something like respect flickered in her eyes. You're not what I expected, she said. Neither is my husband, which is why we're both willing to burn everything to protect each other. Even your principles? Especially those. Principles don't spend. Evelyn extended her hand. Do we have an accord? Lady Whitmore shook it. Dr. Whitmore will develop sudden memory issues by 9 o'clock, she said. His testimony will be withdrawn. But if His Grace reneges on any part of this agreement, he won't. Because I'll destroy him myself if he does. The older woman smiled. I think I may have underestimated you, Your Grace. Most people do. It's useful. Evelyn left before Lady Whitmore could change her mind. She made it to the carriage, gave the driver Adrian's location. He'd already left for the hearing and collapsed against the seat. Her hands were shaking. She'd just promised £60,000 they might not have, and commitments Adrian might refuse to honor. She'd made deals without authority, burned bridges she didn't know existed. She'd become exactly what survival required, and she had no idea if it would be enough. The House of Lords chamber was designed to intimidate. Soaring ceilings, dark wood paneling, rows of seats rising in tiers like a Roman amphitheater. When Evelyn arrived, the hearing had already begun. Adrian stood at the center, isolated, facing a panel of 5 lords who would determine his fate. Marcus sat to one side, looking smug. 30-odd peers filled the gallery, watching like spectators at an execution. Evelyn slipped into a seat near the back, her heart in her throat. The Lord Chancellor was speaking, his voice echoing. Serious allegations of fraud and coercion. Dr. Whitmore's testimony, if credible, would constitute grounds for immediate suspension of ducal authority pending full investigation. Adrian's face was carved from stone. He looked utterly alone. Evelyn willed him to look at her, to know she'd done something, anything, but he kept his gaze fixed forward. We will now hear from Dr. Whitmore, the Lord Chancellor said. Doctor, please approach. An elderly man rose from the gallery. He looked nervous, ill. He took the witness position and was sworn in. Dr. Whitmore, the Lord Chancellor began, you were the late Duke of Blackthorn's personal physician during his final illness? Yes, my lord. And you've submitted testimony that the current Duke coerced his father into changing his will? Whitmore's hand shook. That is... He stopped. The entire chamber waited. I need to amend my statement, Whitmore said finally. I was mistaken in my original testimony. The room erupted. Marcus shot to his feet, face red with fury. What? He shouted. You can't? I was not present during the will's execution, Whitmore continued, voice shaking. I confused it with another occasion. The Duke did not coerce his father in any way that I witnessed. This is absurd. Marcus was advancing on the witness. You told me. Enough. The Lord Chancellor's voice cut like a whip. Lord Marcus, resume your seat. But he's obviously been threatened. Resume your seat or be removed from these proceedings. Marcus sat, but his eyes were murderous. The Lord Chancellor turned to Whitmore. Doctor, are you changing your testimony under duress? No, my lord. I'm correcting an error. I'm an old man. My memory is not what it was. It was a lie so obvious that everyone in the room could see it, but it was a lie delivered under oath, which made it legally binding. Evelyn's breath came out in a rush. Adrian finally turned, scanning the gallery until he found her. His expression asked everything. She nodded once. His shoulders straightened, understanding passed between them like electricity. The hearing continued for another hour. Adrian's witnesses testified. The solicitor confirming the will was properly executed, the nurse attesting to the late Duke's mental clarity. Marcus tried to salvage his case, but without Whitmore's testimony, his foundation crumbled. By noon, it was over. The panel deliberated for 20 minutes, then returned. We find no credible evidence of fraud or coercion, the Lord Chancellor announced. The will of the late Duke is upheld as legitimate. This challenge is dismissed. The chamber erupted in noise. Adrian stood perfectly still, absorbing the words. He'd won. They'd won. But as Evelyn watched Marcus storm from the chamber, face twisted with rage, she knew this wasn't over. They'd won the battle. The war was just beginning. Adrian found her in the corridor outside, pulled her into an alcove where they couldn't be seen. What did you do? He demanded. What needed doing? Evelyn. I made a deal. £60,000 and your public apology to Lady Whitmore's daughter. She held his gaze. And before you start, yes, I had no authority. Yes, it might bankrupt us. And no, I don't regret it. Adrian stared at her. Then he started laughing. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the sound of a man pushed so far beyond his limits that something had broken loose inside him. You magnificent, terrifying woman, he said. Do you have any idea what you've done? Saved your title? Changed everything. He cupped her face. I've spent 11 years building walls. You walked in and burned them all down in a month. Is that a complaint? It's surrender. His forehead touched hers. You win, Evelyn. I can't keep you at arm's length anymore. I can't pretend I don't need you. You've made yourself essential. Good. Her voice shook. Because I need you too. Why? Because you make me better than I thought I could be. Harder, stronger, more ruthless. She pulled back to look at him. And because somewhere between hating you and saving you, I fell in love with you. The words hung between them like a grenade. Adrian's eyes went wide. You... What? Don't make me say it again. No, say it again, please. I love you, you impossible, broken, brilliant man. I love you, and I need you to be okay with that because I can't take it back. Adrian kissed her then, hard and desperate, in the corridor of the House of Lords where anyone could see. And Evelyn kissed him back, staking her claim publicly, irrevocably. When they broke apart, he was smiling, really smiling, for the first time since she'd known him. I love you too, he said. God help me, I think I have since you threw that dinner tray at my wall. That's a terrible basis for affection. It's honest. They stood in the alcove holding each other, and Evelyn let herself believe, just for a moment, that they'd survived the worst. She was wrong. The letter arrived that evening, delivered by a servant who looked terrified. Adrian opened it at dinner, read 3 lines, and went absolutely white. What? Evelyn demanded. He handed her the letter without speaking. It was from Marcus, short, brutal, final. You may have won the title, but you haven't won the war. Check your northern estates. By the time you read this, there'll be ash. Every tenant, every farm, every building. Burn what you can't control. That's what I learned from watching you all these years. Evelyn's hands shook. He can't. Is this legal? Legal doesn't matter. Adrian stood, overturning his chair. The northern estates are his to manage until the full inquiry concludes. If he's burning them, there's nothing... He stopped. His face went from white to gray. What? Evelyn pressed. My mother is there. At the Northern Manor. She's been in residence for 3 months. Adrian was already moving toward the door, shouting for horses. Evelyn ran after him. How long to get there? She gasped. 10 hours if we ride hard. Then let's ride. They left within minutes, barely grabbing coats. 2 horses, 2 riders, racing north through darkness toward an estate that might already be burning. Evelyn had never ridden so hard or so long. Her thighs screamed. Her hands bled from gripping the reins, but she kept pace with Adrian, matching him stride for stride as they tore through the night. Dawn broke gray and terrible. Smoke appeared on the horizon. No, Adrian breathed. They crested a hill and saw it. The northern estate was gone. Not burning, burned. Buildings reduced to blackened skeletons, fields scorched, and in the center of the devastation, a single figure stood waiting. Marcus. Adrian dismounted before his horse fully stopped, stalked toward his cousin with murder in his eyes. "Where is she?" he roared. Marcus smiled. "Who?" "My mother." "Where is my mother?" "Safe. Probably." Marcus tilted his head. "I evacuated the staff before the fire started. I'm not a monster. But the estate? Gone. Every penny of income from these lands? Gone. Your precious legacy? Ash. I'll kill you." "No, you won't, because that would make you exactly what I've been telling everyone you are." Marcus stepped closer. "You can't win this, Adrian. Even if you keep the title, you'll be too broke to maintain it. The estates will crumble. The Blackthorn name will become a joke. And I'll be right there, buying up the pieces." Adrian's hands clenched into fists. "Don't," Evelyn said quietly. She dismounted, moved to stand beside him. "Don't give him what he wants." "Smart wife," Marcus said. "Almost makes up for the age difference." Evelyn looked at the ruins, at the smoking devastation, and felt something cold and certain settle in her chest. "You're right," she told Marcus. "Adrian can't destroy you without becoming what you claim he is." "Exactly. But I can." She stepped forward. "Because I have nothing to lose, no reputation to protect, no legacy to maintain. I'm just a girl from a ruined family who married into power." Marcus frowned. "What are you— Did you know your London residence has a mortgage?" Evelyn's voice was conversational. "Overdue by 3 months. And your gambling debts? Substantial. I have the documentation. All of it. That's how I've been preparing for this since the hearing." She pulled papers from her coat. "Every dirty secret, every hidden debt, every law you've broken. And I'll release it all. Today. To every newspaper in London. You wouldn't dare. Watch me." Her smile was terrible. "You destroyed Adrian's estates? Fine. I'll destroy your life. Publicly. Completely. You'll be lucky if debtor's prison is the worst of it." Marcus's face had gone purple. "Adrian won't let you." Evelyn turned to her husband. "Will you?" Adrian looked at her. This woman who transformed from prisoner to partner to something far more dangerous, and saw himself reflected back. Changed. Capable of ruthlessness he'd never allowed himself before. "No," he said quietly. "I won't stop her." Marcus stared between them. "Then do it. Release your papers. I'll survive." "Will you?" Evelyn stepped closer. "Because I've also documented your role in your first wife's death. The one everyone thinks was an accident. Turns out she knew about the embezzlement, threatened to expose you, and then she fell down the stairs. Tragic." "That's a lie." "Is it? Prove it. In court. Under oath." Marcus's face crumbled. "You can't— I didn't— The truth doesn't matter, remember?" Evelyn's voice was ice. "Only what people believe, and by the time I'm done, they'll believe you're a murderer." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Marcus did something unexpected. He laughed. Actually laughed. High and broken. "You've learned well," he told Adrian. "She's exactly like you now. Ruthless. Willing to burn the world. Congratulations. You've created a monster." "No," Adrian said. "We created each other." Marcus looked between them, saw something that made him step back. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes," Evelyn replied. "It is." Marcus left, stumbling toward his horse like a drunk. They watched him ride away, then turned to survey the devastation. The northern estates were gone. Truly, completely gone. Years of income, hundreds of tenants displaced, a legacy reduced to ash. Adrian sank to his knees in the scorched earth. Evelyn knelt beside him, took his hand. "We'll rebuild," she said. "With what money? We'll find it. Sell something. Mortgage something else." She gripped his hand harder. "We'll survive." "At what cost?" Adrian's voice broke. "Look what I've become. What I've made you become. We threaten murder, blackmail. We've turned into exactly what we claim to be fighting. I know, and you're okay with that?" Evelyn looked at the ruins, at the man kneeling beside her, at the future stretching ahead of them like a minefield. "No," she said. "I'm not okay with it. But I choose it anyway. I choose you. This version, that version, whatever version survives, because the alternative is being alone, even if surviving makes us monsters, especially then." She pulled him to his feet, "Because at least we'll be monsters together." Adrian looked at her, really looked, and saw not the girl he'd purchased but the woman she'd become. Hard where she'd been soft, ruthless where she'd been naive, capable of anything survival required. He'd bought her thinking he'd get an ornament. Instead, he'd found his equal in darkness. They stood in the ashes of his legacy and made a choice that would define everything that came after. Not to be good, not to be noble, just to be together, no matter what that required. It was the most honest thing either of them had ever done. And it was only the beginning. They rebuilt from ash, and the work turned them into something harder than either had imagined possible. The ride back to Blackthorn Manor took 12 hours. Adrian's mother had been found safe in a tenant cottage, shaken but alive. She'd watched her residence burn from half a mile away, helpless. When Adrian embraced her, she felt like paper in his arms, brittle and ready to crumble. "I'm sorry," he told her, "for all of this." His mother pulled back, studied his face with eyes that had seen too much loss. "Don't apologize for surviving," she said quietly. "Your father did that. Apologized for every hard choice, every ruthless decision. It made him weak when strength mattered." She touched his cheek. "Be better than he was." The word settled into Adrian like a blade finding home. They returned to the main estate to find Mrs. Garrick waiting with news that cut deeper than Marcus's fires ever could. "The banks are calling in loans," she said without preamble. 3 different creditors, all demanding immediate payment. "Someone's been buying up your debts." "Marcus," Evelyn said. "Almost certainly." Mrs. Garrick's face was grim. "Between the Northern Estate's destruction and these loan recalls, you're looking at bankruptcy within 6 months, maybe less." Adrian moved to his study without speaking. Evelyn followed, watched him pore over ledgers with the mechanical precision of someone performing an autopsy on his own life. The numbers were brutal. Between what they owed Lady Whitmore, the debt recalls, and the loss of Northern income, Blackthorn was hemorrhaging money faster than they could stop it. Adrian had lands, titles, legacy, all of it worthless if he couldn't meet his obligations. "We sell the London house," he said finally. "That's not enough. Then we sell the Eastern holdings. Still not enough." Evelyn moved closer, looked at the figures herself. She'd learned to read these ledgers over the past weeks, learned the language of money and power. "What we need is immediate liquidity, something worth enough to cover everything." "There's nothing." Adrian's voice was hollow. "I've already mortgaged anything of value. The rest is entailed or held in trust." "Not everything," he looked at her. "The Blackthorn collection," she said. "Your family's art. Some of those pieces are worth fortunes. Those have been in my family for generations. So has this estate. So has the title. Which matters more?" Adrian stared at her like she'd suggested burning down the manor themselves. Then something shifted in his face. The realization that she was right, and that being right meant sacrificing everything his ancestors had built. "This is what we've become," he said quietly. "People who destroy legacies to survive another day." "Yes." Evelyn held his gaze. "Is that worse than losing everything and pretending we fought honorably?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out fresh paper and started making lists. Paintings, sculptures, tapestries. 5 generations of collected beauty, reduced to auction lots. Evelyn watched him work and understood something fundamental about power. It wasn't about what you owned. It was about what you were willing to sacrifice. And right now, Adrian was learning to let go of everything except survival itself. That made him dangerous in ways Marcus hadn't anticipated. The auction took 3 weeks to arrange. They brought in specialists from London, appraisers who walked through Blackthorn Manor with the reverence of people cataloging a dying empire. Every painting was examined, authenticated, valued. Evelyn stood beside Adrian through all of it, watching strangers assess his heritage piece by piece. "This one alone could cover half your debts," an appraiser said, indicating a portrait by some Dutch master Evelyn had never heard of. "Museum quality." "Sell it," Adrian said. "Your Grace," the man stammered. "This has been in your family since—" "I said sell it." The appraiser nodded quickly and moved on. By the end of the first week, they had a preliminary catalog, 73 items, estimated total value, enough to clear the debts with a small margin remaining. It would gut the estate, leave the walls bare, erase visual evidence of Blackthorn power stretching back centuries. But it would buy them time. The auction was scheduled for late June, to be held at Christie's in London. Every collector in England would attend. So would every vulture hoping to pick over Blackthorn bones, including Marcus. He sent a note 3 days before the auction, short, mocking. "I'll be bidding on the Rembrandt. Always wanted one. Perhaps I'll hang it in the Northern Manor once I rebuild. Thanks for the opportunity." Adrian read it twice, then burned it in the fireplace. "He's baiting you," Evelyn said. "I know. Are you going to let him?" Adrian watched the paper curl and blacken. "Every instinct I have says to fight him, challenge him, destroy him for what he's done. But that's what he expects. That's the game he's playing." He turned to her. "What if we changed games entirely? Meaning we stop reacting to Marcus and start attacking." His eyes were cold, calculating. "He's been buying up our debts, which means he's overextended himself financially. He burned the northern estates, which means he's committed arson. He's made himself vulnerable while trying to destroy us. So we hit back. Hard." Adrian's smile was terrible. Before he knows what's happening. Sent. The plan came together over 48 hours of ruthless calculation. They would indeed auction the Blackthorn collection, but not all of it. The most valuable pieces would be held back, secretly sold to private collectors who'd pay premium prices for discretion. The auction would be theater, designed to make Marcus think they were more desperate than they were. Meanwhile, Evelyn would work a different angle. She'd spent weeks gathering intelligence on Marcus's finances, his movements, his allies. Now she would weaponize it. "I need to go to London," she told Adrian. "Alone." "Absolutely not. He's expecting both of us at the auction. If I'm not there, he'll assume I'm broken." "Weak. He won't see me as a threat." Her eyes were hard. "That's when I'll hit him." "Hit him with what?" "With everything we know. Every debt, every crime, every skeleton." She pulled out the documents she'd been compiling. "I'll deliver these to his creditors personally. Make sure they understand he's about to lose everything. That's incredibly dangerous." "I know." She stepped closer. "But it's also the only way. You handle the auction, maintain appearances. I'll cut his legs out from under him where he can't see it coming." Adrian looked at her, this woman who'd transformed from reluctant bride to something far more lethal, and felt pride war with terror. "If he finds out what you're doing, he won't. Because he doesn't think I matter. None of them do. I'm just the young wife, the decoration." She smiled. "That's my weapon. You're sure about this?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." He kissed her then, hard and desperate, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. "Come back to me," he said, "always." It was a promise neither of them was sure she could keep. What? Evelyn left for London the next morning with nothing but a small travel case and enough documentation to destroy a man. The city felt different now. She'd left as a terrified girl being sold into marriage. She returned as something else entirely. A duchess, yes, but more than that. A strategist. A weapon wrapped in silk and manners. Her first stop was Marcus's primary creditor, a banking house in the financial district. She was shown into an office that smelled of cigars and old money. "Your Grace." The banker was a thin man with calculating eyes. "This is unexpected. I'll be brief." Evelyn set her documents on his desk. "Lord Marcus has been using borrowed funds to buy up my husband's debts. Those purchases were made on the assumption he'd win his legal challenge and seize Blackthorn assets. He failed." The banker's expression didn't change. "I'm aware of the hearing's outcome. Then you're aware that Marcus is now severely overextended. Evelyn opened the first folder. These are his current liabilities. Notice the column marked Assets Available for Seizure. It's blank. Because he burned them, the banker said slowly. Exactly. She leaned forward. He destroyed the northern estates thinking he'd broken us. Instead, he's eliminated his own collateral. Your loans to him are now unsecured. The banker's eyes flickered over the numbers. This is concerning. It should be. Evelyn pulled out another document. Because I also have evidence he committed fraud to secure those loans. Falsified asset valuations, forged references. If this were to become public, she left the threat hanging. The banker sat back. What exactly are you proposing, Your Grace? I'm proposing you call in his loans. Today. Immediately. Before he has time to liquidate anything or flee. That would destroy him. Yes. Her voice was ice. It would. And what do you gain? Survival. Evelyn stood. And the satisfaction of watching the man who tried to burn down my life learn what fire actually feels like. She left the documents and walked out before the banker could respond. 2 more creditors. Same conversation, same outcome. By noon, Marcus's entire financial foundation was crumbling, and he didn't even know it yet. Evelyn's next stop was more delicate. She found Dr. Whitmore at his club, looking elderly and nervous. Your Grace. He tried to stand, but she waved him back down. I'm not here to threaten you, she said, taking the seat across from him. I'm here to thank you. Thank me for recanting your testimony. I know Lady Whitmore pressured you. I know you're terrified of Marcus. She leaned closer. But you did the right thing anyway. Whitmore's hands shook. He said he'd ruin me if I didn't testify, destroy my practice, my reputation. And he would have. Evelyn kept her voice gentle. But he's not going to get the chance. Within 48 hours, Marcus will be broke and powerless. You'll be safe. How can you be certain? Because I'm making sure of it. She pulled out a final document. This is a sworn statement from one of Marcus's former servants. She witnessed him ordering the northern estates burned. With your medical expertise on record about the late Duke's capacity, plus this testimony about arson, we have enough to bring criminal charges. Whitmore's eyes widened. You're going to have him arrested? If necessary. Evelyn stood. But I'd prefer to simply destroy him financially and let him live with the ruins. Death is mercy. Poverty is justice. You're nothing like I expected, the old doctor said. No one is. That's how we survive. Guess. The auction was scheduled for 7 in the evening. Evelyn made it back to London with an hour to spare, her hands shaking from adrenaline and lack of sleep. She'd visited 8 creditors, 4 lawyers, and 2 magistrates in 36 hours. Every piece was in place. Now she just had to pray it worked. Christie's auction house was packed. Nobility, collectors, speculators, all crowding in to watch the Blackthorn collection be dismantled. Evelyn spotted Adrian near the front, standing rigid and controlled. He saw her enter and something in his shoulders relaxed. She made her way to him through the crowd. Is it done? He murmured. All of it. How are you? Watching my family's legacy get sold to strangers. He managed a tight smile. So, fantastic. The auctioneer took his position. The first lot appeared, a landscape by some Italian master. Bidding started at £5,000. Within minutes, it sold for 12. And so it went. Piece after piece sold to the highest bidder. Adrian watched with a face carved from stone. Evelyn gripped his hand beneath the folds of her skirt, feeling his pulse hammer against her palm. Halfway through, Marcus arrived. He swept in like he owned the place, surrounded by sycophants, smiling at everyone. When he spotted Adrian and Evelyn, his smile widened. He made his way over, shameless. Adrian. Evelyn. What a tragic evening. My condolences on your losses. Save it, Evelyn said. Such hostility. Marcus tisked. I'm simply here to bid on a few pieces. Support the arts. Nothing personal. Everything you do is personal, Adrian said quietly. True. Marcus leaned in. Which is why I'm going to buy that Rembrandt you love so much and hang it in my study. Every day you'll know I have it. Every day you'll remember this moment. The Rembrandt came up for auction 10 minutes later. Bidding started at $20,000. Marcus jumped it to 30 immediately. Adrian didn't move. Marcus bid 40. Still no response from Adrian. 50,000, Marcus called out. Going once, twice. The hammer fell. Marcus turned to Adrian, triumphant. Thank you for the acquisition, he said. Adrian smiled. Enjoy it while you can. Marcus frowned. What does that mean? It means, Evelyn said quietly, your creditors are waiting outside. What? 3 banks, 2 private lenders, all wanting immediate payment on loans you can't cover. She checked her watch. They should be serving papers right about now. A commotion at the entrance. Men in legal attire pushing through the crowd. Marcus's face went from smug to confused to terrified in 3 seconds. What did you do? He hissed. What you taught us, Adrian said. We burned what we couldn't control. Marcus looked between them, understanding dawning. This whole auction was theater. Evelyn's smile was sharp as broken glass. We already sold the real treasures privately. What you're bidding on are the pieces we can afford to lose. And that Rembrandt you just bought for 50,000? It's a reproduction. The real one sold to a private collector in Paris last week for 3 times that amount. Marcus's face went purple. You're lying. Test me. She stepped closer. But you won't have time, because by tomorrow morning, you'll be in debtor's court explaining how you spent borrowed money to buy paintings while defaulting on secured loans. You can't prove any of this. I already have. To everyone who matters. Evelyn's voice dropped to something dangerous. You tried to burn us down, Marcus. All you did was teach us how to use fire. The legal men reached them. One stepped forward, papers in hand. Lord Marcus Blackthorne? You're being served with immediate debt recall notices from Barings Bank, Rothschild, and Coutts. Total amount due, £320,000. Payment required within 7 days or assets will be seized. Marcus took the papers with shaking hands. You can't. We already did, Adrian said, and there's more. A second man stepped forward. Lord Marcus, I'm Magistrate Collins. I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of arson, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Murder? Marcus's voice cracked. Your first wife's death. We have testimony from a housemaid who witnessed you push her down those stairs. We have the coroner's report you bribed him to falsify. We have everything. Marcus looked at Evelyn, and for the first time she saw genuine fear in his eyes. You're destroying me, he whispered. Yes. Her voice was steady. The way you tried to destroy us. The difference is, we're better at it. The magistrate moved to take Marcus's arm. He jerked away, looked wildly around the auction house. Everyone was watching, nobility, collectors, society, all bearing witness to his fall. You'll regret this, he spat. Both of you. No, Adrian said quietly. We won't. They watched him being led away in chains, his protests echoing through the auction house. The room erupted in whispers. By morning, all of London would know. The man who'd tried to steal a dukedom, brought down by the very tactics he'd employed. Evelyn felt Adrian's hand find hers squeeze once. Is it over? She asked. Almost. What's left? Going home. He turned to face her fully, and figuring out who we are now that we've become this. The journey back to Blackthorn Manor took 2 days. They rode in silence for most of it, both processing what they'd done. The calculated cruelty, the ruthless efficiency, the way they'd dismantled a man's life with the precision of surgeons. On the second night, they stopped at an inn. Adrian barely touched his dinner. Talk to me, Evelyn said finally. About what? About whatever's eating you alive. He looked at her across the table. We destroyed him, completely. He'll either die in prison or live in poverty for the rest of his life. He tried to kill your mother. I know, Adrian's voice was hollow, and I'm not sorry we stopped him. I don't recognize myself anymore. Evelyn set down her fork. Because you've never fought this way before. No. My father raised me to be controlled, disciplined, to manage threats through influence and strategy, not through this warfare. Yes. He met her eyes. Eleanor died because I was too rigid to help her when she needed it. I swore I'd never care enough to be vulnerable again. Then you arrived and made me care anyway. Made me fight for something. Is that bad? I don't know. He reached across the table, took her hand. I just know that the man who bought you 4 months ago wouldn't recognize the man sitting here now. Good. Evelyn squeezed his fingers, because that man was already dead. He just didn't know it yet. And what am I now? Alive. Fighting. Dangerous. She smiled. Mine. Adrian's expression shifted. Am I? You tell me. He stood, moved around the table, pulled her up and into his arms. Yes, he said against her hair. Completely. Terrifyingly. Yours. They made love that night like drowning people, desperate and hungry and trying to prove they were still human beneath all the ruthlessness. When it was over, they lay tangled together in the narrow inn bed, listening to rain hammer the roof. What happens now? Evelyn whispered. We go home. We rebuild. We figure out how to live with what we've become. Can we? I don't know. Adrian's arm tightened around her. But I'd rather try with you than succeed alone. She turned in his arms to face him. Even if trying means more battles, more blood, especially then. Why? Because you're the only person who knows exactly what I've sacrificed and still chooses to stay. His thumb traced her cheekbone. That's worth more than any title. Evelyn kissed him, soft and slow, memorizing the taste of him. The man she'd hated, the man she'd saved, the man she'd become a monster alongside. We're going to be okay, she said. Promise? No, but I choose to believe it anyway. They arrived at Blackthorn Manor 3 days after Marcus's arrest to find the estate transformed. Not physically. The walls were still bare where paintings had hung, the spaces empty where sculptures had stood. But something else had changed. The staff moved differently. Lighter, like a weight had lifted. Mrs. Garrick met them in the entrance hall. Welcome home, your graces. Her voice carried something new. Relief, maybe. Or respect. The tenants have been asking after you. They'd like to offer thanks for handling the situation. Handling. Diplomatic way of saying we destroyed a man, Adrian muttered. You protected them, Mrs. Garrick said firmly. The northern tenants especially. They'd have been homeless if Lord Marcus had succeeded. Now they're rebuilding with compensation from his seized assets. Wait, what? Evelyn frowned. The magistrate ruled that Marcus's personal holdings should be liquidated to cover damages from the arson. Mrs. Garrick allowed herself a small smile. Those funds are being distributed to affected tenants. Your people, your grace. Adrian looked stunned. We didn't arrange that. No, but justice sometimes works regardless. The housekeeper gestured toward the drawing room. You have visitors. They've been waiting. Who? See for yourself. The drawing room held a delegation of tenants from the northern estates. Farmers, craftsmen, workers. They stood when Adrian and Evelyn entered, their faces showing everything from gratitude to awe. An older man stepped forward, hat in hands. Your Grace, we wanted to say, that is, we know what you did, what you sacrificed. The collection, the auction, all of it to keep the estate whole. That's not exactly, Adrian started. Please, let me finish. The man's voice shook. We're common folk. We don't understand high society or legal battles. But we understand this. You could have walked away, let it all burn. Instead, you fought. You bled for us. That means something. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. We don't have much, the man continued, but we wanted you to know we're with you. Whatever you need rebuilt, whatever comes next. We're yours. Adrian's composure cracked. He turned away, shoulders rigid. The tenant shifted uncomfortably. Evelyn stepped forward. What His Grace is trying to say, she told them, is thank you. Your loyalty means more than any title or treasure. You're the foundation of Blackthorn, the real legacy. The tenants nodded, satisfied. They filed out, leaving Adrian and Evelyn alone. He stood at the window, back to her. I don't deserve that, he said roughly. Why not? Because I didn't fight for them. I fought for survival, for you, for purely selfish reasons. And you think that makes you unworthy? Evelyn moved to stand beside him. You think good has to come from pure motives? Doesn't it? No. She took his hand. Good is what you do, not why you do it. You protected those people. The reasons don't erase the outcome. Adrian looked at their joined hands. When did you get so wise? When I married someone who forced me to grow up fast. She leaned into him. We're not heroes, Adrian. We're survivors who managed to do some good while saving ourselves. That's enough. Is it? It has to be. They stood at the window watching the sun set over grounds that were still theirs, barely, held together by luck and ruthlessness, and the kind of partnership neither had expected to find. For the first time in months, Evelyn let herself believe they might actually survive this. That belief lasted exactly 4 hours. The messenger arrived at midnight. Evelyn woke to pounding on the bedchamber door, Adrian already moving to answer it. A servant stood outside, pale and terrified. Your Grace, a writer from London. Urgent news. Adrian took the letter, broke the seal. Evelyn watched his face drain of color. What? She demanded. Marcus. He escaped custody. That's impossible. Apparently not. Adrian's hands shook. He had help. Someone bribed the guards. He's gone. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Where? Unknown. But he left a message. Adrian handed her the letter. It was short, 3 lines in Marcus's handwriting. You took everything from me. Now I return the favor. Run. The last word was underlined 3 times. Evelyn's blood turned to ice. This is a threat. This is a declaration of war. Adrian was already moving, shouting for servants. Get the staff into the main house. Lock every door. Send riders to the tenants. Tell them to shelter in place. You think he's coming here? I think he has nothing left to lose, which makes him the most dangerous thing in England right now. Adrian grabbed her shoulders. I need you to leave. Go to London. Stay with... I'm not leaving. Evelyn, I said, I'm not leaving. Her voice was steel. We fight together or not at all. That's what we promised. If he gets to you, then you'll destroy him. Again. Permanently. She held his gaze. But I'm not running. For a moment, Adrian looked like he'd argue. Then his expression hardened into something that scared even her. All right. Then we prepare for siege. The next 6 hours passed in controlled chaos. Every entrance to the manor was secured. Weapons were distributed to staff who knew how to use them, more than Evelyn expected. Apparently, Adrian kept an armory for exactly this kind of emergency. The grounds were lit with torches. Watchers were posted at every approach. Mrs. Garrick moved through the preparations like a general, organizing defenses with terrifying efficiency. Has this happened before? Evelyn asked her. Once. 20 years ago. Bandits tried to raid the estate. Mrs. Garrick checked her pistol with practiced ease. His late grace was away. We handled it ourselves. And? There were no survivors to attempt it again. The housekeeper moved on. Evelyn stood in the armory, holding a pistol she'd been taught to load but never fire, and wondered what the hell her life had become. 4 months ago, she'd been a girl in London worried about social standing and suitable marriages. Now she was loading weapons to defend an estate against a man she'd helped drive mad. You don't have to do this, Adrian said from the doorway. Yes, I do. Why? Because this is my home too. These are my people. And Marcus wants to hurt you by hurting me. She turned to face him. I won't give him the satisfaction. Adrian crossed to her, took the pistol, set it aside. Then he pulled her into his arms and held on like she was the only solid thing in the world. I'm terrified, he whispered into her hair. Good. So am I. Evelyn pulled back to look at him. But we're terrified together. That counts for something. Before he could respond, shouts erupted from outside. Fire! Someone was screaming. Fire on the eastern approach! They ran. The eastern fields were burning. Not wildfire. Deliberate blazes set in a line, cutting off that entire side of the estate. Through the smoke, figures moved, men on horseback, armed, advancing with the flames. How many? Adrian shouted. 20, maybe more. The watchman's voice shook. They're using the fire as cover. Fall back to the house. Everyone inside. Now. The staff retreated in organized chaos. Evelyn found herself swept along, back through the gardens toward the manor. Behind them, the fires grew. Ahead, Blackthorn Manor rose like a fortress. They made it inside. Doors slammed shut, barred from within. Adrian organized defenders at every window, while Mrs. Garrick ensured civilians were secured in the center of the house. Evelyn ended up at a second-floor window with a rifle she barely knew how to use, watching fires creep closer. "This is insane," she said to no one in particular. "Welcome to nobility," someone answered, a young footman grinning despite the terror in his eyes. Never dull. The attackers broke cover an hour before dawn. They came in a rush, using the dying fires for cover, aiming for the south entrance. Shots rang out, defenders on the roof firing down. 2 attackers fell. The rest scattered. Adrian was everywhere at once, moving between positions, shouting orders, keeping everyone coordinated. Evelyn watched him transform into something she'd never seen. Not the controlled Duke, not even the ruthless strategist. This was pure survival instinct, leadership forged in crisis. He was magnificent and terrifying. The second wave hit harder. More men, better coordinated. They breached the garden walls, made it to the house itself. Evelyn heard glass shatter somewhere below. "They're inside," someone screamed. Adrian was moving before anyone else, heading for the stairs. Evelyn ran after him. "Stay here," he barked. Like hell. They hit the ground floor to find chaos. 3 men had made it through a window, were fighting hand-to-hand with staff. Adrian grabbed one, slammed him against the wall hard enough to crack plaster. The man crumpled. Another came at Evelyn. She raised her rifle, fired without thinking. The recoil knocked her back, but the man went down, clutching his shoulder. She'd shot someone. The thought tried to process, but there was no time. More attackers, more fighting. The entrance hall became a battlefield. Then Marcus walked through the shattered window. He looked insane. Clothes torn, face wild, holding a pistol that shook in his hand. Blood on his shirt. His or someone else's. Impossible to tell. "Adrian," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Finally." Everyone froze. "Marcus?" Adrian stepped forward. "This ends now. You're right." "It does." Marcus raised the pistol, aimed it at Adrian's chest. "I'm going to kill you, then her. Then I'm going to burn this whole place to the ground. You'll never make it out alive. I don't care." Marcus's finger tightened on the trigger. "I have nothing left. You saw to that." Time seemed to slow. Evelyn saw it happening, saw Marcus's intention crystallize, saw the pistol aimed at the man she loved. She moved without thinking, threw herself between them just as Marcus fired. The impact spun her around. She hit the floor, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Someone was screaming. Adrian. Adrian was screaming her name. She'd been shot. The realization came distant and strange, like it was happening to someone else. There was heat in her side, spreading, wet, blood, lots of blood. Adrian was kneeling over her, his hands pressed to her side. His face was white, terrified. "No," he was saying. "No, no, no, no. Stay with me. Evelyn, stay with me." Marcus stood frozen, the pistol still smoking in his hand. "What did you do?" Adrian whispered. His voice broke. "What did you do?" "Saved you," Evelyn managed. Her voice came out weak. "Obviously. You stupid, brave—" He choked on the words. Footmen tackled Marcus, disarmed him, dragged him away, still staring at what he'd done. But Evelyn barely noticed. She was focused on Adrian's face, the way fear had cracked him completely open. "Don't you dare die," he told her. His tears fell on her face. "Don't you dare leave me." "Not planning on it." She tried to smile. "Hurts, though." I know. Stay with me, please." Mrs. Garrick appeared, pushing Adrian aside. "Let me see." The housekeeper's hands were efficient, professional. She'd clearly done this before. Evelyn felt pressure, pain, then something tearing. She screamed. "Bullets through," Mrs. Garrick said. "Clean exit. If we stop the bleeding." "If? When?" The housekeeper's voice was firm. "When we stop the bleeding, she'll survive, but we need to move her. Now!" They carried her upstairs, Adrian never letting go of her hand. Evelyn drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of voices, pressure, terrible pain. At some point, a doctor arrived. She heard him talking to Adrian in low tones. Touch and go. Lost a lot of blood. "Next few hours will tell." "She's strong," Adrian said. "She'll fight." "Let's hope so." A pause. "Your Grace, there are magistrates downstairs. They've arrested the attackers. They're asking about charges. Throw them in prison. All of them, especially Marcus." "What charges specifically?" "Attempted murder. Arson, assault, everything. Make sure he never sees daylight again. The doctor left. Adrian returned to Evelyn's bedside, gripped her hand. She forced her eyes open. "Did we win?" she whispered. Adrian's laugh was broken. "You took a bullet for me. I'd say you won everything." "Good." Her eyes drifted closed. "Worth it then." "Evelyn," his voice cracked. "Stay awake. Talk to me." "Tired." "I know, but please." His forehead pressed against their joined hands. "Please don't leave." She wanted to promise, wanted to tell him she'd fight, she'd survive, she'd be fine. But the darkness was pulling her under, heavy and irresistible. The last thing she heard was Adrian's voice, raw with fear, begging her to hold on. Then nothing. The darkness lasted 3 days. Evelyn drifted through fever dreams where Marcus's pistol fired over and over, where blood pooled on marble floors that stretched into infinity, where Adrian's voice called her name from somewhere she couldn't reach. Pain was the only constant, anchoring her to a body that felt like it belonged to someone else. She woke on the 4th morning to sunlight streaming through windows and Adrian asleep in a chair beside her bed. He looked terrible, unshaven, clothes rumpled, dark circles carved deep beneath his eyes. His hand rested on the bed near hers, close but not touching, like he was afraid even that small contact might hurt her. Evelyn tried to speak. Her throat was desert dry, the sound that came out more croak than word. Adrian's eyes snapped open immediately. He lurched forward, nearly knocking over the chair. "You're awake," his voice cracked. "Jesus Christ, you're awake." "Water," she managed. He poured from a pitcher on the nightstand with shaking hands, helped her drink. The water tasted like salvation. When she'd had enough, she sank back against the pillows, exhausted from even that small effort. "How long?" she asked. 3 days. Adrian set down the glass. "You've been in and out, mostly out. The fever broke last night." "Marcus?" "Prison. Awaiting trial for attempted murder, arson, assault. He won't see freedom again." Adrian's jaw tightened. "They'll probably hang him." "Good." The word came out flat, certain. Evelyn waited for guilt to arrive, for some sense that wishing a man dead made her monstrous. Nothing came. Just cold satisfaction that the threat was neutralized. She'd become someone capable of that, someone who could stare at mortality and come back harder. "The doctor says you'll recover fully," Adrian continued. "The bullet missed everything vital. You were lucky." "Lucky." Evelyn almost laughed. "I got shot. You took a bullet meant for me." His hand finally closed over hers, careful of the bandages. "Why?" "Because losing you was worse than dying." The honesty hung between them, raw and undeniable. Adrian's expression crumpled. "Don't ever do that again," he said roughly. "Don't ever put yourself between me and harm. I can't survive watching you bleed." "Then don't give me reason to." She squeezed his fingers weakly. "We protect each other or this doesn't work. This, us, whatever we've become." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he brought her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles that felt like a vow. "I love you," he said. "I've been sitting here for 3 days trying to remember when I started, and I can't. It just is, like breathing." Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes. "Even when I'm being reckless and stupid?" "Especially then." He managed a broken smile. "You're the bravest person I've ever known. Throwing yourself at assassins, destroying enemies, refusing to let me give up when everything was burning. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. We saved each other." "Yes." His forehead came to rest against their joined hands. "We did." They stayed like that until Mrs. Garrick knocked softly and entered with broth and news that the magistrates wanted statements whenever her grace felt strong enough. Adrian sent them away with instructions to return in a week. Evelyn was too tired to argue. She slept again, and this time there were no nightmares. Recovery was brutal. The wound healed slowly, a constant reminder carved into her flesh of how close death had come. Evelyn spent weeks unable to do more than sit up in bed, frustrated by her body's weakness, furious at her dependence. Adrian rarely left her side. He read to her, played cards when she felt strong enough, sat in comfortable silence when she didn't. They talked about everything except what came next. existing in a suspended present where the future was too uncertain to plan for. The estate slowly returned to normal. The fires were extinguished, damages assessed, repairs begun. Tenants who'd sheltered during the attack emerged and set about rebuilding with the same stubborn determination that had kept Blackthorn standing for generations. Money remained tight, but not catastrophic. The private art sales had covered debts with a small margin remaining. They'd survived, though luxury was now memory rather than reality. 6 weeks after the shooting, Evelyn finally made it downstairs. The journey from bedroom to drawing room felt like climbing a mountain. Her side screamed with every step. Adrian hovered, offering assistance she was too proud to accept until she nearly fainted on the landing. "Stubborn woman," he muttered, catching her. "You're stubborn woman," she corrected. "God help me, yes." The drawing room looked different. Bare walls where paintings had hung, empty pedestals, spaces that echoed. But sunlight still streamed through tall windows, and Mrs. Garrick had arranged fresh flowers that filled the air with the scent of summer. Evelyn sank into a chair and looked around at the stripped-down beauty of what remained. "It's still magnificent," she said. "It's a shell." Adrian stood at the window, looking out over grounds scarred by fire and conflict. "Everything that made it Blackthorn is gone." "No." Evelyn studied his profile. The man she'd hated, fought beside, nearly died for, and saw past the exhaustion to something deeper. What made it Blackthorn isn't objects or money. It's surviving what should have destroyed it. That's still here. Is it enough? It has to be. Because rebuilding is all we have left. Adrian turned to look at her. "And if I'm not strong enough, then we find strength together, like we've been doing." He crossed to her, knelt beside her chair so they were eye level. His hands cupped her face with a gentleness that still surprised her after everything. "I don't deserve you," he said. "Probably not." She smiled. "I don't deserve you either, so we're even." "How do you figure? You made me ruthless. I made you human. We've ruined each other in the best possible way." Adrian laughed, and it was the first genuine sound of joy she'd heard from him in weeks. Then he kissed her, careful of her injuries, and she tasted hope mixed with residual fear. When they broke apart, he stayed close. "Marry me again," he said. Evelyn blinked. "We're already married. I know. But that was duty and desperation, and two people who barely knew each other. I want to do it again. Here, in the estate chapel, with people who matter. I want to choose you deliberately this time. You already chose me, when you could have let me die, and you chose me when you took that bullet." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "So let's make it official. Let's stand in front of witnesses and promise we'll keep choosing each other, even when it's hard." Evelyn felt something warm expand in her chest. "When?" "When you're healed. When we've rebuilt enough to celebrate." His smile was tentative. "When we're ready to believe we might actually have a future, then yes." She kissed him softly. "Yes, I'll marry you again." Ian. The trial happened in autumn. Marcus stood before magistrates and nobles alike, facing charges that would ensure he never saw freedom. The evidence was overwhelming. Testimony from survivors of the attack, physical proof of arson, witnesses to attempted murder. Adrian attended every day, sitting in the gallery with Evelyn beside him. They watched Marcus's defense crumble, watched him rage and plead, and finally fall silent as the weight of his crimes became undeniable. On the final day, Marcus was allowed a statement. He looked diminished. Prison had hollowed him out, turning the smug aristocrat into something skeletal and desperate. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I wanted what was mine," he said. "The title, the estates, the respect. Adrian had it all, and I had nothing. So I took what I thought I deserved. By burning and killing," the magistrate said flatly. "By doing what powerful men have always done." Marcus's eyes found Adrian in the gallery. "You're no different. You destroyed me just as completely as I tried to destroy you." "The difference," Adrian said quietly, "is I was defending what was already mine. You were trying to steal it." "And that makes you righteous?" "No. It makes me a survivor." Adrian stood. "You taught me that everything comes down to one choice: destroy or be destroyed. I chose not to be destroyed. That's the only morality that matters." The magistrate cleared his throat. Lord Marcus Blackthorne, you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment for attempted murder, arson, and conspiracy. You will be remanded immediately to Newgate Prison. Guards moved forward. Marcus looked at Adrian one last time. I hope it was worth it, he said. Everything you sacrificed to win. Adrian's hand found Evelyn's. It was, he said. They watched Marcus being led away, and Evelyn felt the chapter finally close. Not with triumph, but with something quieter, relief, exhaustion. The knowledge that survival had cost them pieces of themselves they'd never get back. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. Nobles whispered. Society would talk about this for years. The Duke who'd destroyed his own cousin, the young Duchess who'd taken a bullet to save him. Let them talk, Evelyn thought. We know what we are. The second wedding took place on a December morning when frost turned the estate into something crystalline and beautiful. They kept it small. Mrs. Garrick, the household staff, tenants who'd stood with them during the siege. Adrian's mother, elderly now but fierce-eyed, who pulled Evelyn aside before the ceremony. You've changed him, she said, made him capable of feeling again. I didn't think anyone could. He changed me too. Good. The older woman's smile was sad. That's what love does. Changes you until you're not sure where you end and they begin. Is that advice? It's observation. She touched Evelyn's cheek. My son has been dead inside since Eleanor. You brought him back to life. Whatever comes next, remember that. You gave him a reason to survive. The ceremony was simple. No grand declarations, no elaborate vows. Just two people standing before witnesses and promising to keep fighting for each other. When the minister asked if Adrian took this woman, he answered without hesitation. I do. Again. Always. Evelyn's turn. The words caught in her throat for a moment, overwhelmed by the weight of everything they'd survived together. I do, she managed, for as long as we both shall live. The kiss was gentle, reverent, full of acknowledgement for how close they'd come to losing everything. Afterward, there was simple food and local wine. Tenants offered toasts that ranged from heartfelt to bawdy. Adrian laughed more than Evelyn had ever seen, the sound of it filling the stripped-down manor with something like joy. Late in the evening, they slipped away to the library. Evelyn's wound still ached when she moved too fast, but she was healing, slowly becoming whole again, in all the ways that mattered. Adrian pulled her close, careful of her injury, and they swayed to music drifting from the celebration below. Have I told you today that you're magnificent? He asked. Not in the last hour. Terrible oversight, he kissed her temple. You're magnificent, even though I can't dance without wincing, especially then. His arms tightened fractionally. You're the strongest person I've ever known. Taking a bullet was just confirmation. Evelyn rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Do you think we'll ever be normal? God, I hope not. Normal is boring. You know what I mean. Do you think we'll ever stop fighting for survival and just live? Adrian was quiet for a moment. I think we're learning how. Slowly. One day at a time. That's not much of a plan. No, but it's honest. His hand traced patterns on her back. We'll probably always be harder than most people. More ruthless. We've seen too much to go back to innocence. Is that bad? It's real. He pulled back to look at her. And real is all I can offer you. It's enough. Evelyn stood on tiptoe, kissed him softly. You're enough. Winter passed into spring, and the estate continued its slow transformation. Fields were replanted. Buildings rose from ash. The tenants who'd fled the fires returned and set about rebuilding lives with the same stubborn persistence that had always defined Blackthorne people. Money remained tight, but no longer catastrophic. Adrian had learned to live within means rather than beyond them, had discovered that influence didn't require ostentatious display. The stripped-down manor became a different kind of statement, evidence of survival, of choosing substance over show. Evelyn found her own rhythm. She worked with tenants on rebuilding projects, learned estate management from Mrs. Garrick, became the kind of duchess who knew every family by name and understood their struggles. The girl who'd arrived terrified and resentful was gone completely, replaced by someone harder and more capable. She still had nightmares sometimes. Dreams of Marcus's pistol, of blood on marble, of darkness that wouldn't lift. Adrian would wake with her, hold her until the shaking stopped, remind her she'd survived. They'd both survived. That was the miracle and the burden. On a warm May evening, Evelyn found Adrian in the gallery with Eleanor's portrait. He stood in front of it as he had that first time she'd discovered him here, but his posture was different, less haunted, more at peace. Evelyn moved to stand beside him, studying the painted woman who'd died too young. "I never thanked her," she said quietly. "For what?" "For teaching you what loss felt like. It made you capable of fighting to prevent it happening again." Adrian's hand found hers. "That's a generous interpretation." "It's true. You saved me because you knew what it cost to fail someone." Her fingers laced through his. "Eleanor's death gave you the capacity to protect me. I don't know if she'd see it that way." "Maybe not, but I do." Evelyn looked up at him. "And I think she'd be glad you found someone worth protecting." Adrian studied his sister's portrait for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. "I think she would have liked you," he said. "You're stubborn and reckless and completely impossible, just like she was. Is that a compliment?" "The highest one I know." They stood in the quiet gallery hand in hand, and Evelyn felt something shift. Not healing exactly, some wounds never fully healed, but acceptance. The past would always be there, shaping them, but it no longer defined them. "I want to put other portraits here," she said. "New ones. Of people who matter now." "Such as?" "Us. Your mother, Mrs. Garrick, the tenants who fought beside us." She gestured at the empty walls. "Fill this place with evidence of survival instead of just legacy." Adrian considered this, then nodded. "Yes, let's do that." It was a small thing decorating walls, but it felt like reclaiming space, transforming a shrine into something living. They were building a future from ruins. It wouldn't look like the past, wouldn't recreate what had been lost, but it would be theirs, hard-won and deliberately chosen. That was worth more than any inherited glory. Summer arrived with heat that made Evelyn's scar ache. She stood in the garden one July morning, supervising the planting of new roses, when a servant brought news that made her stomach drop. "Your Grace." The young man looked nervous. "There's a delegation from London. They're requesting an audience with His Grace about a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "They wouldn't say, but they seem official." Evelyn found Adrian in his study, already reading the letter the delegation had brought. His expression was unreadable. "What is it?" she asked. "A petition from the House of Lords." He set down the paper. "They're offering to restore partial funding for the northern estates, reparations for Marcus's destruction." "That's good news, isn't it? At a cost." Adrian's jaw tightened. "They want me to take on a larger role in governance, sit on committees, advise on policy. Basically become what I've always avoided, politically active. Why? Because competence is apparently rare, and they watched me survive an assassination attempt and trial without crumbling. They think I'd be useful. Would you? Probably." His smile was tired. "But it means giving up the isolation I've built, engaging with the same people who watched Marcus nearly destroy us and did nothing." Evelyn moved closer. "What do you want to do?" "I want to say no, to keep our heads down, rebuild quietly, never risk exposure again." He looked at her. "But that's fear talking, and what does courage say? That we didn't survive everything just to hide. That maybe we owe it to the people who stood with us to use whatever influence we have for something good. Then do it." "Just like that?" "Just like that." She took his hands. "You've spent years afraid of caring, afraid of losing, afraid of being vulnerable. All it did was make you lonely. So try the opposite. Care deeply, risk everything, see what happens." Adrian pulled her close, rested his forehead against hers. "When did you get so wise?" "When I married a man who forced me to be brave." She kissed him softly. "So be brave back. Show them what a duke looks like when he actually gives a damn." The decision to engage changed everything. Adrian threw himself into political work with the same intensity he'd once used to avoid it. He sat on committees addressing land reform, labor conditions, economic recovery. He became known not for aristocratic privilege, but for practical solutions forged from personal experience. People noticed. The Duke who'd survived a cousin's coup, who'd rebuilt from ashes, who actually understood what loss felt like. That was someone worth listening to. Evelyn worked alongside him, though her focus was different. She established programs for tenant families, created opportunities for education and advancement, used her position to advocate for people society normally ignored. Together they became something unusual. Not just nobles maintaining status, but partners actively working to make their corner of England better. It was exhausting. Constantly engaging, constantly fighting small battles against entrenched interests. But it was also purposeful in a way neither had experienced before. They were building something that mattered. One evening in late autumn, nearly 18 months after the shooting, Evelyn found herself standing in the same drawing room where she'd first met Adrian for breakfast. The walls were no longer bare. New portraits hung there now, paintings of tenants who'd fought during the siege, of Mrs. Garrick, of Adrian's mother, of Evelyn herself looking fierce and determined. Evidence of who they'd become rather than who they'd inherited. Adrian appeared in the doorway, looking tired but content. "Come to admire your handiwork?" he asked. "Our handiwork." She turned to face him. "We did this together." He crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. The embrace was familiar now, safe, the kind of contact that spoke of partnership forged in fire. "I've been thinking," he said against her hair. "Dangerous." "Hush." "I've been thinking about legacy, about what we leave behind." And I don't want it to be land or titles or objects. I want it to be change. Real, lasting change that helps people survive what we survived. Evelyn pulled back to look at him. "What are you proposing?" "A foundation. Using Blackthorn resources to fund education, housing, medical care for people who need it. Make the estate mean something beyond aristocratic inheritance. That's ambitious. It's necessary." His eyes were serious. "I've spent my whole life protecting Blackthorn for future generations. But what's the point if those generations inherit nothing but empty tradition? So we fill it with purpose instead." "Exactly." Adrian's smile was tentative. "What do you think?" "I think it's the best idea you've ever had." She kissed him. "Let's do it." The Blackthorn Foundation launched on a cold January morning. They gathered in the estate chapel, not for prayer, but for purpose. Tenants, nobles, politicians, anyone who believed in what they were building. Adrian spoke briefly about second chances and survival and using power to protect rather than dominate. Evelyn watched him address the crowd and felt pride swell in her chest. This was the man she'd married twice now. Not the ghost haunted by loss, but someone capable of hope. When he finished, applause filled the chapel. Real, genuine support from people who'd watched them burn and rebuild and refused to surrender. After the ceremony, as guests mingled over simple refreshments, a young tenant woman approached Evelyn. "Your Grace?" She looked nervous. "I wanted to thank you. For the school you're funding. My daughter will be able to read now. Have opportunities I never did." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. "That's what we're here for." "No." The woman's eyes were fierce. "You're here because you chose to be. You could have walked away after everything. Instead, you stayed and fought for us. That matters." She walked away before Evelyn could respond, leaving her standing there with tears in her eyes. Adrian found her moments later, one look telling him everything. "You all right?" he asked quietly. "Better than all right." She turned to face him. "For the first time since arriving here, I feel like I belong. Not as your wife or a duchess, but as myself. You always belonged." He touched her face gently. "You just had to believe it. Took almost getting killed to figure that out." His expression darkened briefly. "Don't remind me." "Hey." She caught his hand. "We survived. That's what matters. We survived, and we're building something worth surviving for." Adrian pulled her close, and they stood in the crowded chapel, surrounded by people and purpose, and the tangible evidence that destruction didn't have to be permanent. They'd been broken, both of them, in different ways. But broken things could be repaired if you were willing to do the work. And they'd done the work. Every brutal, exhausting, terrifying step of it. Spring came again, as it always did, turning the estate green and gold. Evelyn woke one April morning to sunlight and Adrian's arm draped across her waist. They'd fallen asleep talking about foundation business, her head on his chest, his fingers in her hair. She studied his sleeping face, older now, marked by everything they'd endured, but peaceful in a way he'd never been when they first met. This was what they'd fought for. Not grand romance or fairy tale endings, just this. The quiet intimacy of two people who'd seen each other at absolute worst and chosen to stay anyway. Adrian's eyes opened, caught her watching. "Morning," he murmured. "Morning. How long have you been staring at me? Long enough to confirm you drool in your sleep." "I do not." He pulled her closer, mindful still of the scar on her side that would never fully fade. "Slander. Prove it." He kissed her instead, slow and thorough, the kind of kiss that spoke of years together rather than months. When they broke apart, both smiling, he traced the line of her jaw with his thumb. "I love you," he said, "just in case I haven't mentioned it today. You told me twice last night. Worth repeating." Evelyn felt warmth spread through her chest. "I love you too, even when you're being impossible, especially then." They lay tangled together as morning light filled the room. Two people who'd married out of desperation and discovered something far more valuable than duty. They'd found partnership, the kind that survived sieges and bullets and the slow rebuilding of shattered lives. Later there would be work, foundation business, tenant meetings, political maneuvering, the machinery of survival that never really stopped. But for now, there was just this. Sunlight and skin and the steady rhythm of shared breathing. It was enough. It was everything. Years passed. The foundation thrived, expanding beyond Blackthorn to help estates across England. Adrian became a respected voice in Lords, known for practical wisdom and genuine care. Evelyn ran the day-to-day operations, turning abstract ideals into concrete change. They had children eventually, two daughters who inherited their mother's stubbornness and their father's intensity. The manor that had once echoed with loneliness filled with noise and life and chaos. Marcus died in prison, alone and unmourned. They heard about it secondhand, felt nothing but relief that the threat was finally, permanently neutralized. Eleanor's portrait remained in the gallery, but it was surrounded now by evidence of life continuing, family photographs, drawings from the children, artifacts of survival and growth. On their 10th wedding anniversary, the second one, the one that counted, Adrian took Evelyn back to the chapel where they'd married twice. It was empty, quiet, unchanged. "Do you remember what I said?" he asked. "When I proposed doing this again? That you wanted to choose me deliberately." She smiled at the memory. "Not just survive together, but actually live." "And have we? Lived?" Evelyn thought about everything that had happened, the battles, the scars, the slow transformation from enemies to partners to something deeper than either word captured. "Yes," she said finally. "We've lived, fully, without apology." Adrian pulled her close, and they stood in the quiet chapel where they'd made promises that seemed impossible at the time. "No regrets?" he asked. "Hundreds." She looked up at him. "But not about this. Never about this." He kissed her then, and it tasted like coming home. Outside, their daughters were playing in gardens that had burned and been replanted. The estate that had nearly destroyed them both now stood as evidence of what could be built from ruins. Legacy wasn't about preserving the past. It was about creating a future worth inheriting. They'd learned that the hard way, through blood and fire and choices that stripped them down to essential truths. But they'd learned it, and they'd survived it. And somehow, impossibly, they'd found love in the wreckage. That was the real victory. Not defeating Marcus or saving the estate or rebuilding the fortune. It was choosing each other every single day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. That was the lesson carved into Evelyn's scar, burned into Adrian's memory, woven through every stone of Blackthorn Manor. Survival wasn't the goal. Living was. Actually living, with all the risk and pain and terrible beauty that entailed. They walked out of the chapel hand in hand, into sunlight and noise, and the chaotic joy of a life they'd built from nothing. It wasn't the future either had imagined. It was better, because it was real, hard-won, and entirely their own. And that was worth everything they'd sacrificed to get here. What? Evening fell soft and golden over Blackthorn Manor. Adrian stood at the same window where he'd once watched Evelyn arrive, 19 and furious and convinced she was going to her own funeral. 10 years had passed since that day, a lifetime compressed into a decade. She appeared beside him now, older but no less fierce, their youngest daughter on her hip. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "The girl I bought." His smile was soft. "And the woman she became. I became her because of you." "No, because of us." He touched her face. "Everything we survived made us both into something neither could have been alone." Their daughter squirmed, wanting down. Evelyn set her loose, and she ran off toward the kitchen, chasing whatever adventure called to children. "Do you think she'll understand someday?" Evelyn asked. "What it cost to build this life?" "Maybe." Adrian pulled her close. "Or maybe she'll just inherit the result and that will be enough." "Is it?" He considered the question. Thought about Eleanor and loss and the ghost he'd been for so many years. Thought about the woman beside him who'd refused to let him stay dead. "Yes," he said finally. "It's enough. More than enough. It's everything." They stood at the window watching darkness fall over grounds that had seen fire and blood and desperate battles, but also rebirth, growth, the stubborn persistence of life finding a way. Somewhere in the house, their daughters were laughing. In the village, tenant families were gathering for evening meals in homes rebuilt from ash. Across England, the foundation they'd created was helping others survive their own catastrophes. The legacy wasn't perfect. Nothing built from ruin ever was. But it was real. And it was theirs. Adrian turned from the window, pulled Evelyn into a kiss that tasted like 10 years of survival and partnership and love that refused to quit. When they broke apart, she was smiling. "Ready for another 10 years?" she asked. "With you?" "Always. Even though it will probably be terrible and exhausting and full of battles we can't predict, especially because of that." His forehead rested against hers. "I wouldn't want it any other way." "Good. Because you're stuck with me. Best purchase I ever made." She laughed, swatted his arm, and he caught her hand and held on. They stood there as darkness completed its fall, two people who'd been bought and sold and nearly destroyed, who'd chosen each other anyway and built something worth dying for. And then lived for it instead. That was the final lesson, the one that mattered most. Life was for the living, and they'd finally learned how to be alive. Together. Always together. And that was how the story ended. Not with grand triumphs or perfect resolution, but with two people standing in the dark, holding hands, ready to face whatever came next. Because they'd survived the worst. And they'd do it again if necessary. But this time they wouldn't be alone. They had each other. And that was enough to face anything, even the future.